Hey everyone, welcome back. Chapters 1401 through 1420 of the previous episode. After securing the Grand Primordium Origin Stone, Qinmu focuses on perfecting the Great Celestial Heavens technique, while navigating the intricate power struggles of the Celestial Venerables. Qinmu orchestrates a complex plan to force the Celestial Venerables into a stalemate, utilizing the Grand Emperor's revival and his own mastery over space and consciousness to survive their assassination attempts. Qinmu eventually secures the Ancestral Court, uncovering its nature as a graveyard of ancient knowledge and potential. In a pivotal turn, Qinmu returns to the past, where he assists Celestial Venerable Yun in his revolutionary efforts and witnesses the brutal reality of the ancient gods' rule. He discovers that the gods are essentially parasites feeding on human suffering. Back in the present, Qinmu reconciles with old allies, including the human emperors and the members of the disabled elderly village. The narrative concludes with Qinmu continuing his preparations for a final revolution, determined to break the cycle of tyranny established by the Celestial Venerables and the ancient gods. If possible, you can support me via PayPal or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Tales of Herding Gods audio series. Chapter 1421 Sabers to Nourish the Spirit. On Surging River, the light of the sabers rose up and 5 figures collided. The 5 of them immediately used their divine arts that had entered the path and raised their cultivation to the extreme at the first collision. There was a saying among the divine arts practitioners in Eternal Peace that those who wielded sabers were all boors. Even though this saying was somewhat biased, such as Butcher who looked like a boor but was in fact a great scholar, the people who wielded sabers didn't have as many probing methods as those from the divine arts or sword arts schools. Knives were a battle technique sect, and it was also a close combat sect. The degree of close combat was even deeper than martial arts. For example, in knife skills there was close combat back-to-back, using muscles and chi dynamic to find the opponent's weakness and kill him in one strike. Divine arts and sword skills had many probing moves, but knives were close combat. If the opponent used his full strength to probe, he would be the one at a disadvantage. Butcher, Zhehuali Tianshu, and Luo Wuxuang attacked Qinmu almost at the same time. Zhehuali had gone through battle after battle on the western front of Eternal Peace all these years. The battlefield was different from the fighting of the martial arts world. The training of these years had allowed his knife path to become more and more profound. This was the ability honed in the slaughterhouse. Every move took one's life, and knife path became more and more profound, becoming more and more unpredictable. At the same time, he also had the majestic aura of heavenly knife. His knife skills had the word strange and also the word righteous. He had also fused the algebra of Dao sect, and with Luo Wuxuang's technique, he could be considered to be marvelous. He had already reached the 9th heaven of knife path. The moment he collided with Qinmu, he immediately felt that Qinmu's magic power and cultivation were about the same as his, and he instantly felt at ease. Qinmu, this brat, ran to the heavenly court to become heavenly venerate Mu. He really has been living in luxury or slacking off. My cultivation has been raised to Jade Platform realm, so he's most likely also a Jade Platform about the same as me. Back then, his cultivation was far more profound than mine. Luo Wuxuang had already cultivated to 18 heavens of knife path, and his cultivation realm had even reached skyscraping realm. Eternal Peace's paths, skills, and divine arts flourished, and when he came to Eternal Peace, his cultivation and abilities soared by leaps and bounds. However, when his moves collided with Qinmu's knife, he felt Qinmu's magic power flowing endlessly like a torrential river that flowed endlessly. It was on par with his own cultivation. His heart instantly turned cold. So powerful. As expected of Overlord Body, his cultivation has risen so quickly. He must be an expert of Jade Capital Realm. He knew that Qinmu was almost unmatched on the same realm, and only Heavenly Venerate could contend with him. Thus he felt that Qinmu's Jade Capital Realm was enough to contend with him on Skyscraping Realm. Butcher's heavenly knife collided with Qinmu's knife, and he could feel that Qinmu's cultivation and abilities were about the same as his. Moore has cultivated to God Execution Stage realm all these years, but he's not slow either. It's just that the degree of his cultivation isn't as astonishing as before. Back then, no one in our disabled elderly village could receive his moves on the same realm. On the other side, Heavenly King Tianshu revealed a towering emperor's might, and a heavenly palace leaped out from behind him. His primordial spirit was majestic as he sat on the emperor's throne in soaring heaven's treasure hall. With the emperor palace divine blade in his hands, all its power was unleashed. The butcher was right when he said that he was the emperor's blade. Heavenly King Tianshu headed to the Great Void Land to find his initial heart. After experiencing the bloody battle in the Great Void Land, the barrier that trapped him was completely destroyed. He broke through during the battle and cultivated to the emperor's throne. He became another emperor's throne realm expert in the founding emperor heavenly court. The imperial palace divine blade was a divine blade that heavenly King Shurtian forged for him. For a long time the power of this blade was above Tianshu's own power. One blade cut through Tubohorn and created a Fengdu. One blade cut through the mountains of great ruins, sealing the strangeness and darkness of great ruins in great ruins. And now, Heavenly King Tianshu's power was enough to perfectly control the imperial palace. He was the Emperor of Knives, and his knife was the Devil Knife of Yudu. However, when Imperial Citadel Divine Knife collided with the knife chi formed by Qin Mu's vital chi, Heavenly King Tianshu's aura couldn't help fluctuating. So powerful, to be able to withstand 100% of my magic power. He's indeed worthy of being the heavenly venerate that even founding emperor can't forget. He managed to cultivate to emperor throne realm in just a dozen years. However, after I drank wine, even if I am someone that even Earth Count and Son of Heaven Een are not weak, the Celestial Master will still slash me. 100% of my combat power is not my upper limit. He let out a long roar in anger. His movements were ghostly. At times his body would transform into demonic chi and dissipate. At other times he would be like a devil's sun hanging high in the sky. At other times his tendons and body would be ferocious. He had the head of a snake and the body of a human. His body was tall and sturdy. He controlled the great Tao of Hades. At other times he had the head of a goat and the body of a human. He was extremely small, it was hard for people to find him. However, the power of his knife was absolute. The power of his knife skill didn't leak out at all, and it had the unique style of founding emperor era. The four knife Tao masters attacked at the same time and clashed with Qin Mu's knife. Each of them had different conclusions, and they all felt that Qin Mu's cultivation realm was about the same as theirs. The five figures rose and fell like rabbits, each perfectly displaying their own paths in their knife skills. Zhehuali's evil, Luo Wushuang's dermic powers, Tianshu's tyranny, devil path, and Butcher's imposing manner were all displayed. Qin Mu, on the other hand, gathered their evil and devilish dermic powers into one body. He used Knife Path Heavenly Palace as the main heavenly palace, and the other heavenly palaces as auxiliary heavenly palaces. One Knife Path Heavenly Palace, a divine knife formed from vital chi, moved unhindered and blocked the four great knife path experts at the same time. Previously, he had followed the butcher to temper his Tao heart of Saber Tao. Be it in terms of legislation or protecting the world, they were all to temper his Tao heart of Saber Tao, and from the tempering, he comprehended the most basic divine power to enter the Tao of Saber. Unyielding, that was why he knocked on the South Heaven Gate. It was unfair, so he had to legislate and protect. That was why he had to kill. Sabers nourished the spirit. Only by mastering the basic spirit of these three-blade Tao could he be considered to have officially entered the door. In the future, no matter how his blade Tao changed, how it evolved, what could not be abandoned, and what could not be deviated, these three spirits would be abandoned, deviated, and that was the Tao of abandoning the blade. The butcher was unable to teach him more and give him more guidance, so he had to integrate what he had learned and comprehended. Around the surging river, the fishing boats had already stopped fishing. On the riverbank, there were fishermen and divine arts practitioners. They all stopped and watched. However, they saw the light of the saber moving freely in the river. It was like the sunlight shining on the surface of the river. However, the light of the saber did not stick to the surface of the river. Instead, it suddenly jumped up and filled the blue sky. There was also the light of the saber moving through the river. It was like a big fish or a green dragon. Rays of light interweaved and tore apart the sky, leaving black lines in their eyes. Black blood instantly flowed out of the eyes of the divine arts practitioners of eternal peace. Knife wounds instantly appeared on their bodies, and they couldn't help being shocked. They immediately restrained the fishermen by the river bank so that they couldn't look anymore so as not to hurt their eyes. The battle in the river had reached such a level. Even though the ripples of power from the battle techniques weren't as powerful as the divine arts and the range of the divine arts was wider, the battle techniques that focused on knives, the spirit hidden in their moves could easily injure the Tao heart and spirit of the spectators. This was especially so for Qin Mu, Butcher, and the other three who were great grandmasters who had entered the path of knives. Their moves might not seem to have affected this area, but each and every one of them contained their path. With just a glance, their spirit, qi, and spirit would be triggered as if they were being stabbed. The stronger their cultivation was, the stronger their senses would be, and the heavier their injuries would be. The divine arts practitioners were restraining the fishermen, and the dragon palaces in Surging River were also migrating. Divine dragons of all sizes swam at the bottom of the river, closing their eyes as they followed Surging River Dragon King upstream or downstream. Hide in the heavens in the heart of Surging River. Lock the doors, close your eyes, don't look, don't listen, don't feel. Surging River Dragon King was called Dragon Rearing Sovereign, and he was also a great expert in the river. His cultivation was profound, and he was very proud of himself in his heart as he shouted, "Amazing, right? My master is back." The tip of the treasured sword was sharpened, and so was the knife. Qin Mu used qi as a knife, and his body's essence, qi, and spirit were sharpened by the four great experts until they became stronger and sharper. When the same divine art that had entered the path, different mental states, and different moves were executed, the knife skills would be different. However, in the end, the five of them used the divine art that had entered the path thousands of times, but they still couldn't do anything to Qin Mu. They actually couldn't force Qin Mu to take another step forward and comprehend a more profound Tao realm. 3 days later, there were no longer any figures on Surging River. Only 5 figures were left standing on the surface of the river. They stood there without moving, their spirit, qi, and spirit clashing against each other. This scene was even more terrifying. Knife, qi, and spirit filled the surface of the river, causing the space to distort. Tens of thousands of knife qi were like a school of fish clashing fiercely in the air. Knives nourished the spirit. They were clashing with spirit. Nearby, many scholars from the former Surging River School rushed over upon hearing the news. As soon as they reached the riverside, their own spirit weapons flew out of control, ringing in the air and colliding with the saber qi in the air. Crash! The spirit weapons shattered one after another in the air, shocking the scholars. And the closer they got to the Surging River, the faster the spirit weapons shattered. The strange thing was that this kind of saber qi was harmless to humans, and it didn't harm flowers, trees, insects, or fish. It seemed to only target weapons. Chief Su. A few scholars quickly passed through the dense forest by the riverbank and came to the riverbank. They saw a few gods standing by the riverbank and looking at the heart of the river. The leader was Su Yunji from the Surging River School. What shocked these young scholars was that Su Yunji and the group of gods from the Surging River School couldn't help but float in the air. Their divine weapons burst out waves of monstrous divine power, as if they were fighting against the saber Tao spirit from the heart of the river. And the divine weapons of these gods were already filled with saber marks. The spirit of the Tao of the saber seemed to form a great spiritual brand here. This brand became stronger and stronger, spreading throughout the sky, causing the people who came here to lose control of their spirit weapons and divine weapons. Moreover, this brand was getting deeper and deeper. They stood by the river and could see that the heart of the river had many layers of the Tao of the saber, big and small. It was branded in layers of void, and the deepest one was already as deep as 18 layers of void. Tao realm was like a dome that covered all 4 corners of the land, giving people an incomparably shocking feeling. If you study with your heart, you can touch their spirit. Su Yunji said to the scholars, "This is a rare opportunity. If you want to have a deeper understanding of Blade Path, then seize this great opportunity." After another half a year, the imprints in the void became deeper and clearer. This place had almost become a sacred ground. All the young people and gods of eternal peace, all those who learned blade or sword, all of them had to rush here to make a pilgrimage. Around Surging River, divine weapons floated in the air and surged continuously, bursting out with all kinds of divine might. This was a trick that someone had thought of. They would use the might of the saber path here to hone their Tao and the might of the divine weapons. However, here there were more young divine arts practitioners and gods from all over eternal peace. They sat upright and didn't move, nourishing their spirit, sharpening the will of their sabers, and sharpening their own vital qi. A year later, on both banks of surging river, blades and swords were everywhere like a forest. This place had already become a sacred ground. There weren't many people cultivating blades in eternal peace, and most of them were cultivating their swords and heart of the sword. Once the sacred ground of blade path was formed, it would cause a wave of people to learn it. As for the dome of Tao realm of blade path in the void, it seemed to have already taken form, allowing the figures of the 5 people in the river to be imprinted in the 18th void, clearly visible. There was an ancient imperial preceptor, Zhang Baigui, who used swords to meet friends and defeated all the battle techniques and divine abilities in the world. He raised the status of sword arts to the level of the number 1 technique in eternal peace. From then on, sword Tao flourished. Today, the 5 saints of Blade Tao comprehended Tao by the river and established the sacred land of Blade Tao. It is even more shocking than before. The Tao of Blade will also flourish. Another year passed, and the sky of Blade Tao suddenly trembled and appeared in the 19th void. The power of the blade path spread out, covering a radius of 10,000 miles. 2 years and 1 month passed, and the sky of blade path covered the 20th void. The next month covered the 21st void. 2 years and 3 months covered the 22nd void. 2 years and 6 months passed, and the 25th void was covered. The power of the blade path had already covered half of eternal peace. The 5 blade path grandmasters in Jiang Xian were revered as the 5 ancestors of blade path. On this day, surging river suddenly trembled. It gradually rose into the sky and floated higher and higher like a white and transparent streamer that floated from the side of the magnificent divine mountains. Qin Mu suddenly opened his eyes. It was time. The 11 great spirit energy mutual migration bridges of the ancestral court had been built, and the celestial court had started to migrate. The entire celestial court and countless gods would use the spirit energy mutual migration bridge matrix to migrate to the ancestral court. The time to eradicate the heavens was almost up. Qin Mu's expression was solemn. If the heavenly court moved to the ancestral court, the next step that the heavenly court would have to deal with would be Heavenly Duke. Heavenly Duke seeking death wasn't for death, but for freedom. However, based on Qin Mu's understanding of Celestial Master Hong, even though he was the reincarnation of Heavenly Duke, he was no longer a Heavenly Duke. He was filled with a thirst for power, a thirst for power. After breaking free from the shackles of Heavenly Tao, Heavenly Duke Hong would become a 10th Heavenly Duke who had boundless power. If Qin Mu wanted to participate in it and save Heavenly Duke Hong, he would have to have even stronger power. And the best shortcut at the moment was to grasp the great Tao of the God execution stage of the ancestral court through the tempering of the God execution stage of the ancestral court. At that time, Qin Mu would stand firmly on the realm of 9 prison stage. At that time, when he faced 10 heavenly venerables, he would have more or less the strength to resist. The heavenly river rose higher and higher, which represented the movement of the heavenly court. The situation was critical now, and there was no time to delay. Butcher Tianshu and the rest stood up and their gazes landed on him. Butcher said, "You want to go to the ancestral court now and face the world's number 1 ferocious knife?" Qin Mu nodded his head. In the past 2 years and 6 months, the 5 of them had raised Knife Tao to the extreme. They would first fight with Knife Tao to raise Qin Mu's understanding and comprehension of Knife Tao. After that, they would unleash their own spirit. Knives nourish the spirit, and they would fight against Qin Mu with their own spirit. They would use their spirit to hone their spirit, and they would use the will of knives to hone Qin Mu's will. They would raise Qin Mu's Knife Tao and turn his spirit into knife light. During this period of time, Qin Mu's comprehension of knife path had risen to the extreme. He used their spirit as a sharpening stone to sharpen himself. He could be said to have used all his intelligence and wisdom to fuse everything he had learned in the past into knife path. In 2.5 years, his knife path had reached the 16th heaven and surpassed Butcher. Soon, he caught up to Luo Wushuang and came to the 18th heaven where he had entered the path with knives. He used his divine ability to enter the Tao to create his own Tao of the Blade. In the end, Butcher, Tianshu, Zhehuali, and Luo Wushuang also improved under his mental training. In the end, their essence, qi, and spirit sharpened each other, imprinting layers of void space. Together, they deduced the Tao of the blade to the level of the 25th void space. In 2.5 years, the 5 great masters of the Tao of the blade not only improved their Tao of the blade to the level of the 25th void space, but also to the level of imprinting the Tao of the blade to the level of the 25th void space. This was definitely a great breakthrough in the Tao of the blade. It could be said to be a feat that would affect the later generations of knife skills and divine arts. However, at this step, their accumulation had basically been exhausted. Even if they could evolve to the next heavens, the time spent would also increase greatly. Butcher said in a deep voice, "We will follow you to the ancestral court to see the world's most ferocious knife." Qin Mu hesitated for a moment and looked at Tianshu, Zhehuali, and Luo Wushuang. The ancestral court's god execution platform was the world's most ferocious knife. Killing the strong practitioners of the emperor's throne would probably be like chopping melons and cutting vegetables. He didn't want to see his good friends risk their lives for him. However, with his current understanding of knife Tao, it was still very difficult for him to barge into the god execution stage and not die. He didn't have the confidence to get past this god execution stage and didn't have any confidence at all. If his knife Tao could be raised to 28 heavens, 29 heavens, or even 30 heavens, he might still be able to get past the god execution stage. However, that was impossible now. Luo Wushuang said indifferently, "I once went to the god execution stage of the heavenly court and didn't die. The knife Tao of the god execution stage of the heavenly court is delicate and strict. If I go to see the god execution stage of the ancestral court, it might be very helpful to you." Zhehuali stretched his muscles and bones and said with a smile, "I've never been to the ancestral court, so it's good for me to see the world. I'm not like you who are extremely bold. I'm only going to take a look and I won't go in." Tianshu chuckled and said, "The world's most ferocious blade, could it be even more ferocious than my Imperial K? This blade of mine can cut off the horn of the earth count. I don't believe that a natural thing can be better than the Tao of the blade that we worked so hard to comprehend." After experiencing surging rivers Tao enlightenment this time, each of them had gained a lot. They had nurtured their essence, qi, and spirit to be invincible, and trained their willpower to be like their sabers. The 4 stooges are at least comparable to Celestial Master Mu. Butcher said calmly, "The 5 of us have already stepped into the peak of the Tao of the saber. There is no other peak above us that we can climb. The world's most ferocious blade. No matter what, the 5 of us have to go for it. Since you feel that you can't protect yourself, why don't the 5 of us climb up this god-slaying platform and give it a try?" Tianshu licked his lips. He said, "Our abilities have already been imprinted in the 25th void. Even if we die, our great Tao will not be obliterated because of our death. With this achievement, this life is enough. Even founding emperor is only 10 heavens above us. 35 layers of void of sword path." Luo Wushuang was fascinated. He muttered, "If knife path cannot reach 35 layers of void and compete with sword path for supremacy, what a sad thing it would be. Perhaps the god-slaying platform of the ancestral court is the turning point for our knife path to take another step forward." Qin Mu looked at them and felt the hearts of their fists and their warm emotions. All that was left in his heart was gratitude. The so-called seeking Tao was actually just worrying about his safety. "All right."
Qin Mu laughed loudly.
"We 5 stooges, let's go together." Everyone laughed loudly. 5 stooges, could it be that they can't compare to founding Emperor of Sword Tao? Let's go together. In the ancestral court, the 11 psionic mutual shift bridges were connected to form an enormous front bridge. The locations of the 11 psionic mutual shift bridges were determined by the precise calculations of the experts of the Taoist community. The locations of these mutual shift bridges could be connected to each other, and the light of this mutual shift bridge was just enough to include the entire heavenly court. On this day, countless gods of the heavenly court moved out one after another. Countless warships sailed out of the heavenly court. Thick chains were tied to the ships at one end and the heavenly court at the other end, trying their best to drag the behemoth. In the heavenly court, there were powerful existences on each of the palaces and temples. They urged the power of the palaces and the 72 temples to accelerate the heavenly court. At this moment, The heavenly river twisted and moved with the heavenly court. In the sky above the ancestral court, a corner of the vast heavenly court had been revealed from the spiritual energy shift bridge. The giant ships were all at full power, dragging the chains and trying to pull the heavenly court into the ancestral court. It was difficult to move the giant creature in a short time with the power of the shift bridge alone. Almost all the gods in the heavenly court had been mobilized. Even so, the heavenly court was still moving slowly. This scene was absolutely magnificent. When the shadow of the heavenly court shrouded the sky above the ancestral court and the shadow gradually grew larger, the starry sky above the ancestral court lost its color and the sun lost its luster. The space of the ancestral court was even compressed and distorted. Violent turbulence spread out in all directions in the void. As the heavenly court squeezed into the ancestral court, psionic energy spewed out from the bridges. The light was clearly visible to all living beings in the Yuan world. The light was the spiritual energy spewing out from the ancestral court, and it was the spiritual energy that had migrated out. In the Yuan world, one could see 11 pillars of light formed by spiritual energy and spiritual energy. As the pillars of light spewed out, vast and mighty energy gathered and gradually formed stars above the original heavenly court, continents and world barriers. The magnificent heavens formed as the heavenly court left. The place where the heavenly court disappeared became extremely colorful. In the ancestral court, the 10 heavenly venerates stood beside their respective psionic bridge and looked up at the sky. The heavenly court arrived at the ancestral court bit by bit. However, although the heavenly court's Taoist sex calculations were ingenious, the heavenly court was too big, and there were still some mistakes during the transfer. The edge of the heavenly court did not fully enter the transfer bridge. It was cut by the light of the transfer bridge and immediately separated from the heavenly court. There were also some ships that caused the heavenly court to tilt or shift slightly when they dragged the heavenly court. As a result, they were cut off by the bridge, and the pieces fell from the sky. The pieces dragged a long flame with a tail that was hundreds of thousands of kilometers long. They fell into the ancestral court from the sky and crashed into it after more than 10 days. Even so, the pieces did not burn clean. They still crashed into the ground of the ancestral court, causing mountains to collapse and the earth to crack. Firestorms roared, and fire meteors rained down like rain. Natural disasters continued to happen. The 11 heavenly venerates turned a blind eye to this, and continued to monitor the migration of the heavenly court. The heavenly court that had been cut off was only a tiny part of this behemoth. It was insignificant. At this moment, the northern heavenly gate was cut open. The huge heavenly gate tilted and fell down from the heavenly court. The majestic heavenly gate turned into bright stars in the sky. The stars were torn apart by the geomagnetic origin energy of the ancestral court, and thus split into dozens of pieces. They were like dozens of dazzling big stars. Suddenly, Celestial Master Hong frowned slightly and called a disciple of Tao Sect over. He said in a deep voice, "Why is the speed of relocation slowing down?" The disciple of Tao Sect quickly said, "Celestial Master, the relocation bridge is too hot. When the spiritual energy is transferred, the spiritual energy will rub against the altar and the altar will not be able to withstand it. We are mobilizing the rain masters and water gods of the various heavens to come and cool the relocation bridge." The Tao Master also said that we should adjust the ship now so that the heaven court won't be cut off too much by the bridge. Celestial Master Hong nodded and said, "Quickly mobilize the rain masters and water gods from all the heavens and the dragon kings from the sea as well." The Taoist left in a hurry. On the other side, the other celestial masters also asked about this matter. Consort Changtian sent the Taoist away and thought to herself, "Mobilizing the rain masters and dragon kings from all the heavens will probably take more than a month." Just as she thought of this, another disciple suddenly came to report, "Your Majesty, Celestial Master Mu is here. He said that he is going to the god-slaying platform in your Majesty's territory." Qi Tianfei was slightly startled and said with a smile, "This kid is rough. He is here to die. Just let him go." That disciple hurriedly said, "There are 4 strange people who came with Celestial Master Mu. One of them is missing an arm, one is a drunkard, one looks like a pig butcher, and the other is a slob with a demon saber on his back and an eye on it." Heavenly Venerate Mu said that he brought a few friends and planned to ascend God execution platform together. Concubine Gao Tian waved her hand and didn't mind. No matter how many people he brings, they are all sending themselves to their deaths. Go back and tell Heavenly Venerate Mu to let them ascend God execution platform. I still have to stay here to take charge of the overall situation, and will go over to help him later. That disciple immediately acknowledged and quickly left. In front of the God execution platform of the ancestral court, there was still 100 miles away from it. Qin Mu and Butcher stopped and looked at the two incomparably terrifying divine knives of baleful qi. Their expressions couldn't help changing and they praised in unison. What fierce knives! Explosions rang out around them. It was the power of the world's #1 fierce knife of God execution platform. When the 5 great grandmasters of knife path came here, the knife wills formed by the two baleful qi collided with their knife wills. The God-slaying platform was formed naturally. For a long time, it had been absorbing the murderous aura between heaven and earth. After being nourished by the murderous aura brought about by the countless years of war in the ancestral court, it became incomparably powerful and fierce. Fortunately, the 5 of them were all saber masters and were not invaded by the saber intent of the ferocious saber. Tianshu's face was ashen. He turned around and left. He chuckled and said, I suddenly remembered that I still have something important to do. You guys go ahead. I'll leave first. Butcher pulled him back and said, I still have a ship of fine wine here. Tianshu's expression was uncertain as he gritted his teeth and said, I have to let the god of thieves steal another ship. I'll drink it afterwards. Butcher smiled and said, That's easy to say. Everyone, have you all noticed it? Everyone looked over. Butcher smiled and said, These two murderous auras have been connected to the spirit for a long time. They're going to turn into 2 peerless divine sabers. If we can subdue them, these 2 sabers can probably be called supreme treasures. Everyone's hearts trembled and they hurriedly looked at the 2 baleful qi, but they couldn't see anything. The vertical eye in the heart of Qin Mu's brows opened and also looked at the 2 baleful qi. His body couldn't help trembling slightly and he praised in a low voice, What handsome 2 divine knives! The last time Qin Mu came here, he didn't have a deep understanding of the path of knives and didn't dare to take a closer look at the god execution stage of the ancestral court. Now that he had a deeper understanding of the path of knives, he looked at the god execution stage. He discovered many things that he had never discovered before. They were knives that were like 2 swimming dragons, swimming in the baleful aura. These 2 divine knives had a peerless fierce might and absorbed the baleful aura that had gathered over a long period of time, making them psychic. Not only that, the 2 sabers naturally contained the great Tao of the god-slaying platform. Logically speaking, they should have formed creatures similar to ancient gods, but for some reason they had formed 2 divine sabers. The saber chi that they felt came from these 2 divine sabers. However, these 2 sabers were still in the process of forming. They had form but not substance. If the 5 stages of the formation of the universe were to be considered, the innate 5 taunts, these 2 sabers belonged to the very beginning stage. Butcher's understanding of knife path was higher than the others, so he could sense the 2 knives in God execution platform first, but the others couldn't. Qin Mu's divine eyes were unparalleled, so he could also see them. The 5 of them walked toward God execution platform. Heavenly King Tianshu was swaying while gulping down fine wine. He was timid, and only by drinking could he restrain the cowardice in his heart. The other heavenly kings of the founding emperor often mocked Tianshu. They said that before he drank, Tianshu massaged the founding emperor's shoulders and back. After he drank, he squinted and let the founding emperor massage his shoulders and back. Originally, Tianshu was at the back of the 5 of them. However, as they drank, Tianshu ran to the front of the 5 of them. He stretched out his hand and tore off the clothes on his body, revealing his chest. He laughed and said, Chong Tian concubine, this woman is beautiful, but it's a pity that I haven't been able to get close to her. This woman is alone in the empty room. Let her come out and give me a good time. The disciple of Chong Tian concubine was in existence at the throne realm. Her name was Feng Xian. When she heard this, she couldn't help but furrow her brows and force herself to endure. She thought to herself, this shifty-eyed guy seems to be the rebel Tianshu, the guy who dares to fight with Son of Heaven Yin. Celestial Master Mu looks gentle and refined, but how did he get involved with such a rebel? Her cultivation realm was extremely high. and she led the way in front. The blade energy of the god-slaying platform posed a great threat to her. The closer she got to the god-slaying platform, the more unbearable it became for her. The blade energy from the god-slaying platform not only invaded her body, but also invaded her Tao heart, causing a great disturbance to her Tao heart. What was even more terrifying was that countless blade energy invaded her primordial spirit, causing her primordial spirit to feel as if it was being stabbed by thousands of blades. She would feel a stabbing pain from time to time. Furthermore, the baleful qi in the knife qi made her lose her mind. The invasion of the baleful qi caused her temples to throb all of a sudden, and her blood qi surged up. She wanted nothing more than to hack the drunkard beside her to death. However, that drunkard Tianshu still kept moving closer to her, asking her when Consort Chong Tian would come to entertain Old Master Tian. If it wasn't for the face of Heavenly Venerate Mu, I would have chopped you up into minced meat and braised you. Fong Xian had a smile on her face, and her pearly teeth were chattering loudly. Her Tao heart still couldn't compare to Qin Mu, Butcher, and the rest. Even Tianshu was much stronger than her. Tianshu was as timid as a mouse when he was sober, but after being drunk, Tianshu's Tao heart was clear and his devil nature was stimulated. He was fearless, and his Tao heart reached 25 heavens. When they were 10 miles in front of God Execution platform, Fong Xian couldn't take it anymore. She hurriedly took out the protective talisman that concubine Liao Tian had given her and hung it around her neck. The amulet emitted a miraculous Tao rhythm and dispersed the saber power of the god-slaying platform, preventing the power of the two ferocious sabers from entering her body. When she arrived at the huge god-slaying platform, the amulet given to her by concubine Qi Tian also seemed to be unable to take it and let out a soft sound. Fong Xian was terrified and hurriedly said, "We have arrived at the god-slaying platform. Heavenly Venerate Mu, I can only send you here. This god-slaying platform is extremely dangerous. Heavenly Venerate, be careful." Just as she was about to leave, Tianshu glanced sideways and saw a palace next to it. This god-slaying platform was completely bare. Even the soil of the ancestral court had been sliced into pieces by the saber qi. There were no plants or mountains. This palace could actually be preserved in such a dangerous place. He could not help but click his tongue in wonder and immediately wanted to barge in. This must be the sleeping quarters of Empress Chong Tian. It's warm and fragrant. The drunken heavenly king dragged the imperial palace divine saber and barged into the palace gate. He shouted, "The heaven's imperial concubine is a rare beauty. Come out quickly and let Master Tian have a good time." If the heaven's imperial concubine can sleep, why can't I sleep? Fong Xian could not hold it in any longer and exploded with anger. She caught up and said sternly, "You dare to break into the Empress's sleeping palace?" Suddenly an earth-shattering sound came from the palace. Tianshu fell and flew out. It was obvious that there was an extremely powerful seal in the palace that sent Tianshu flying back towards Fong Xian. Fong Xian was slightly relieved. She raised her hand towards Tianshu's back and used 80 to 90% of her strength. She thought to herself, "This fellow is a traitor. I'll give Celestial Master Mu some face and not kill him, but at the same time, I'll teach him a lesson. As long as he is slightly injured, he will be sucked dry by this god-slaying platform. Even if Celestial Master Mu blames him, he can't blame me." Just as her palm was about to land on the back of Tianshu, Tianshu's Imperial Palace Divine Saber suddenly turned and struck Fong Xian's chest. The jade talisman on Fong Xian's chest let out a soft ding sound and suddenly shattered. Fong Xian was astonished, and her killing intent instantly reached her body. Knife marks immediately appeared on the surface of her skin, and they were from the knife qi of God execution stage. The moment the knife qi touched her skin, the killing intent had already invaded her body, injuring her primordial spirit and Tao heart. The moment her Tao heart was damaged, the qi and blood in her body instantly went out of control and gushed out from the wounds on her body. They were drawn by the killing intent of God execution stage and rushed toward it. "We've been ambushed." Fong Xian instantly knew something was wrong and quickly glanced at Qin Mu and the rest. She only saw Qin Mu, Butcher, Zhehuali, and Luo Wushuang watching from the side with cold eyes. When she tried to ambush Tianshu, the four of them didn't help her. Not only that, even the drunken Tianshu seemed to have sobered up by 70 to 80% as he stared at her without blinking. They want to break my jade talisman and take the opportunity to see the power of the god-slaying platform. Feng Xian had more wounds on her body and her qi and blood flowed faster. With an angry shout, the Heaven Palace appeared behind her. Her immortal soul was sitting on the throne of the Heaven Palace's jade capital's Lingxiao Hall. At this moment, her Heaven Palace was filled with saber lights, especially in the Lingxiao Hall. The saber lights were like a tide, causing her immortal soul to be riddled with wounds. Feng Xian mobilized all the power of her Heaven Palace to forcefully resist the knife might of God execution stage. She retreated and rushed into the distance. The qi and blood that surged out of her body was like a long rainbow that was held back by God execution stage. Even though Feng Xian had run 100 miles, she still couldn't stop it from devouring her qi and blood. She ran for 1,000 miles, and only then was God execution stage unable to devour her qi and blood. She couldn't help heaving a sigh of relief, and her vision suddenly turned black. She almost fainted on the ground. Qin Mu and the rest's gazes followed her figure closely. Only when God execution stage stopped devouring her qi and blood did they retract their gazes. Tianshu was incomparably calm. How could he still look like he was drunk and babbling nonsense? The knife might of God execution stage first broke through the skin of Feng Xian and then destroyed her Dao heart. Her Dao heart collapsed and her qi and blood lost control. Her cultivation would rapidly decline and her qi and blood would be devoured by God execution stage. He said in a deep voice, "Enter the god-slaying platform, and you must not suffer any injuries." Shahuali raised his head and looked at the god-slaying platform. After the two streams of evil aura devoured the qi and blood of the fragrant purple smoke, the evil aura became even more intense, he said. "My Dao heart can be protected, but my cultivation is insufficient. The first person to be injured on the god-slaying platform is me. With my cultivation, it would only take an instant for the god-slaying platform to plunder my qi and blood. My primordial spirit would be severed, and my body and Dao would be destroyed. However, in terms of the evil of the Dao of the saber, the divine saber of the god-slaying platform is inferior to mine." Butcher also made his own judgment, he said. "With my attainments in the Dao of the saber, I can ascend this divine platform to ensure that I will not be injured by the saber qi. However, when I reach the platform, the moment the two divine sabers move, I will be beheaded and executed. My strength is insufficient. If I have sufficient strength, I might be able to fight." Luo Wushuang said in a deep voice, "I have only one arm, and I have a huge weakness in defense. If I can't ascend the god-slaying platform, my physical body will be damaged. Although I can maintain my Dao heart, my strength will deteriorate very quickly. However, when I reach the platform, I might be able to block one of the divine sabers." Tianshu said, "Judging from the speed at which Feng Xian's aura is weakening, I will also be damaged when I face the two divine sabers. I will die on the stage within a breath's time. But as long as I can block them, I will be able to stand firmly on the stage." The 5 of them were all veterans. From the moment Tianshu pretended to be drunk and teased Empress Qi Tian, the other 4 understood his intention. They understood and allowed Tianshu to tease Feng Xian. Feng Xian's Dao heart was not as good as theirs. After being tricked by the protective jade talisman given to her by Empress Qi Tian and being attacked by the god-slaying stage, the 5 of them took the opportunity to estimate the attack power and attack method of the god-slaying stage. They also calculated their own shortcomings and strengths. Only by knowing oneself and the enemy could one win 100 battles. The more they knew about the god-slaying platform, the greater their chances of winning over the god-slaying platform. Although Feng Xian was in existence at the Emperor Throne Realm, and was the disciple of the Destruction Heaven concubine, she had little experience in the Jianghu. Compared to the 5 of them who were rolling in the mud, she was much inferior. Especially when her Dao heart was suppressed by God execution platform, she had easily fallen into Tianshu's calculations. The 4 of them analyzed their own pros and cons and looked at Qin Mu together.
Kvin mues gaze flitzkeret.
"With the help of the 4 of you, we can cross God execution platform and obtain the great Dao of God execution platform. It's stable now." Wang. His divine treasure domain suddenly spread out, and the 4 of them stood in it. Instantly they felt that their gazes could actually see up, down, left, and right in front of them at the same time. From any angle they were facing them head-on. At the same time, Qin Mu used Knife Path Heavenly Palace as the main body, and the other heavenly palaces as support. He gathered his qi to form a knife, and his Tao heart was firm. He executed Knife of Protection, and everyone's will formed a city. Their breaths were linked together, and their magic power was linked. Zhehuali, Butcher, and Luo Wushuang instantly felt their cultivation and magic power increase exponentially. In an instant, it was as if they had the magic power of an emperor's throne. Heavenly King Tianshu felt his magic power decrease slightly, but it didn't drop by much. It still allowed him to maintain his emperor's throne realm. The four of them were astonished. This magic power was clearly not Heavenly King Tianshu's magic power, but Qin Mu's. It was truly inconceivable that Qin Mu's magic power was actually so profound. The one who had the biggest impact was still Zhehuali. He had originally thought that Qin Mu's cultivation and magic power wasn't much different from his, but he hadn't expected the difference to be so great. It was so great that it was hard to catch up to him. This was also a matter of course. The path he had taken was still Eternal Peace's normal path of cultivation. Even though the 7 divine treasures had combined into one to refine Heavenly River Divine Treasure, Qin Mu had already jumped out and only had one Spirit Embryo Divine Treasure. It contained the Ancestral Court, Xiandu, Yuandu, Yudu, for extreme heavens, and even the 10,000 worlds of the heavens. Just the magic power contained in the Spirit Embryo Divine Treasure alone surpassed his by countless numbers. In addition to Qin Mu having 19 heavenly palaces, the 4 great heavenly gates in the heavenly palaces were all built according to the great Tao of the Ancestral Court. And it was the same for Jade Lake and Jade Terrace. He had also created a new realm, 9 prisons platform. Apart from that, there was also Absolute Beginning, Tai Su, and Tai Chi. The 4 great Tao had been refined into 4 great mineral veins, and the power of their magic power was so vigorous that even Lan Yuqian was much inferior to him on the same realm. As for the 10 heavenly venerables, they were even further apart. If they were to talk about it purely in terms of magic power, Qin Mu would have long surpassed an ordinary emperor seat strong practitioner. Fortunately, this brat is still slightly weaker than me in Knife Dao. Zhehuali was satisfied. It's stable, Luo Wushuang said in a deep voice. Butcher nodded. It's stable. Zhehuali revealed a confident smile. We can definitely pass God execution stage. Tianshu's eyes shone brightly. We can fight. The 5 of them executed their magic power to raise their Tao hearts and shouted in unison. Tao Realm 25 Heavens. The 5 voices overlapped together, thick and powerful. The 25th heavens of their Tao of Knives burst forth and overlapped together, forming 5 huge Knife Tao domains. They were all different and made up for their shortcomings. They covered Qin Mu's Divine Treasure domain together. Qin Mu took a step forward and walked towards God Execution platform. When he reached the first step, the 5 of them felt the pressure increase greatly. The pressure of God Execution platform came crashing down and collided with their 25th heavens of Tao realm. It was as if they had entered a terrifying battlefield. Countless divine knives came attacking from all directions and collided with their Knife Tao domain. At the periphery of the 25th heavens, countless knife lights appeared. It was Qin Mu, Butcher, and the rest's will of Knife Tao colliding with the baleful chi of God Execution stage. The knife lights were incomparably dense and rang non-stop. Even so, Butcher, Zhehuali, Tianshu, and Luo Wushuang still held their knives and didn't move. They used their mental wills to collide with the baleful chi of God Execution stage. Qin Mu ascended the second step, and the pressure increased by a notch. The 5 of them still held their knives and didn't move. Qin Mu climbed up 1 step at a time. 1 step led to another. When they reached the 9th step, the baleful aura of God Execution platform began to invade the 9th heaven of their Tao realm. And its power was astonishing. There were a total of 25 steps on God Execution platform. When Qin Mu reached the last step, the baleful aura of God Execution platform had already invaded their 25th heaven Knife Tao domain, and the baleful aura was about to reach their bodies. The 5 of them suddenly pulled out their knives, and their bodies crisscrossed. Knife lights crisscrossed, and they blocked the 2 baleful aura divine knives that were attacking them from the sky. Dang 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 dang. 5 loud sounds rang out in succession. The bodies of the 5 of them trembled violently, and their footsteps couldn't help moving. They all retreated in different directions. The knife chi that was formed from the baleful aura in their bodies rampaged. The baleful aura of the two divine knives was extremely powerful, and the instant they collided with their divine knives, it actually invaded their bodies. Countless blade lights burst forth from their bodies, killing their primordial spirits, Tao hearts and corporeal bodies. The strength of the two divine knives on God execution platform had exceeded their expectations. Ki. Qin Mu Butcher Tianshu Luo Wushuang, and Jahuali's footsteps were in a mess. Countless wounds on their bodies exploded, and blood splattered everywhere. In front of Qin Mu, a drop of blood flew past the vertical eye in the heart of his brows. There were actually tens of thousands of scarlet blade lights flying out from that drop of blood. They were like a crystal that was constantly rotating and expanding, changing endlessly. Not easy divine art. Qin Mu shouted out, and all the divine blood that flew out from their bodies suddenly flowed back. The wounds on their bodies also healed in an instant. Qin Mu shouted out, "Refine the baleful qi in your bodies. These two knives have yet to take form, so we can seize their baleful qi and cultivate our knife path." The five of them moved their bodies and once again formed a formation. They each executed their magic power to refine the baleful qi in their bodies. The two incomparably thick baleful auras in the sky were shaken until they were somewhat scattered. Within the baleful aura, two blood-red saber lights were like two evil dragons. Their bodies were covered with reverse scales that were like saber rays, suffused with a terrifying Tao might. The two evil dragon divine sabers spun gently and charged downwards. The dragon scales expanded outwards, like countless divine sabers attacking them. The five of them saw dazzling blood-red light everywhere. The power of the ancestral quartz god-slaying platform was fully unleashed, and they heard loud and noisy fighting sounds, as if there were billions of people fighting and killing each other. The blood-red light in front of them turned into countless figures. There were creators and ancient gods who fought desperately in the sea of blood, and the corpses piled up into mountains in the sea of blood. It was a scene like hell. This was the baleful qi of blood. It was the desire of all living beings to kill gathered together. The baleful qi gathered together, and the qi and blood of the dead gathered together to form a terrifying baleful qi. Their eyes could no longer see the two divine blades condensed from baleful qi. It was as if they were fighting against the endless desire to kill that had existed for billions of years. The incomparably dense baleful qi corroded their Tao hearts. It filled their hearts with the desire to kill. Defend your Tao heart firmly. Don't be influenced by the blood fiend. Butcher said loudly. If you are influenced by the blood fiend, you will easily be assimilated by the blood fiend and become a part of the god-slaying platform. As soon as he finished speaking, Shahuali's entire body exploded. His boundless qi and blood surged out from his body and transformed into the blood fiend. It turned into a blood fiend evil dragon that swam around and attacked everyone. The butcher was shocked. He knew that although Jahuali had been training the will of the Tao of the saber with them, his cultivation was still shallow and his Tao heart was not stable. He had been assimilated by the blood fiend and died an unnatural death. As soon as Jahuali died, Luo Wushuang immediately felt sorrow from the bottom of his heart. He liked this disciple the most. Although he had expelled Jahuali from the sect in his heart, he still regarded Jahuali as his most beloved disciple. At this moment, the sorrow in his heart turned into anger and anger turned into evil. He swung his blade angrily. As the blade light slashed towards the two evil blood dragons, his body suddenly exploded and turned into the evil blood qi. His entire body melted into blood. He turned into an evil dragon and charged out while shaking his head and tail. The butcher felt a chill in his heart. Suddenly, his eyes turned blood red and returned to darkness. He immediately knew that when his Tao heart was unstable, he was invaded by the evil blood and was blinded by it. He did not panic in the face of danger. The blade light covered all directions. At this moment he heard Heavenly King Tianshu's angry roar, followed by the sound of his skin exploding. Butcher's heart sank. Although his eyes could not see, he had already seen Heavenly King Tianshu's body explode and his qi and blood turned into blood fiend. This god-slaying platform is 100 times more terrifying than the five of us imagined. Heavenly King Tianshu was the only one among them who had cultivated to the throne realm. Even though he had only cultivated to the throne realm a few years ago, His cultivation was extremely profound and his attainments in devil nature were extremely deep, otherwise, he wouldn't have become the mortal enemy of Sun Yin. Bloodfiend also contained devil nature. However, the devil nature of Bloodfiend had crushed Tianshu's devil nature and caused his desire to grow crazily, thus destroying his Tao heart. This Bloodfiend was simply too strong. I must not let Moore suffer any damage. When this thought appeared in Butcher's mind, the desire to protect his Tao heart burst forth. Since ancient times, there had been countless people who wanted to protect their relatives, friends, and companions. Their baleful aura had also gathered here. When Butcher had this thought, these baleful aura invaded his body. Butcher instantly felt his Tao heart shattering in the baleful aura. His body and primordial spirit were affected by the baleful aura and disintegrated. Moore, let's go. His corporeal body exploded and he roared at Qin Mu before turning into a blood dragon. Wang Qinmu's divine treasure territory rotated, and Butcher, Heavenly King Tianshu, Luo Wuxuang, and Zhehuali woke up one after another. Time seemed to return to the moment before they were killed by the two Bloodfiend divine knives. The four of them still had lingering fear in their hearts, and the baleful aura in their bodies was still stirring. The two Bloodfiend evil dragons pounced over once more, and Qin Mu shouted loudly, "Refine the Bloodfiend Qi, Tao realm as one /" Butcher, Zhehuali, Tianshu, and Luo Wuxuang waved their knives, and their essence, Qi, and spirit gathered together. With Tao realm overlapping, they waved their knives down. Dang, on God execution stage, 3 world-shaking knife lights burst forth, and the knife lights shattered. They swept out in all directions, turning into countless knife rain that swept through everything with God execution stage as the center. Countless saber lights collided and shattered in the air, turning into even finer saber lights. They spread out in all directions at an extremely fast speed, forming a terrifying saber light storm. Soon, the saber light storm hit the bedroom of the Heaven's concubine below. Even the Heavenly King of Tianshu found it difficult to enter this bedroom because the door was sealed by the Heaven's concubine. However, under the destruction of this storm, the entire sleeping palace was stained with blood under the blade lights. The blood evil invaded the sealed palace of concubine Liao Tian, causing it to be riddled with holes. The seal of concubine Liao Tian exploded. Even the seal of a heavenly venerate was eroded by countless flying knives that collided within the seal, weakening the power of the seal. 1,000 miles away, Feng Xian raised her head and saw the storm of blade lights sweeping over. She forcefully suppressed her injuries and flew up. However, she was swept away by the storm in the next moment. In the storm, Feng Xian rolled and tumbled. Her heavenly palace was instantly riddled with holes, and her corporeal body was also covered in wounds. Fortunately, her vitality was strong, so she forcefully rushed into the distance in the storm. She finally broke away from the storm and staggered in the air. Her heart was filled with shock and anger. These 5 fellows don't want their lives anymore. Suddenly, an incomparably majestic voice came from 1,000 miles away. Tao realm cleaves open the heavens, sending great Tao into the void. Feng Xian hurriedly turned her head back and saw that on the incomparably majestic God execution platform, 25 layers of void had opened up, and the Tao of knives that had been entrusted to the 25 layers of void burst forth from the void, connecting with the knives of Qin Mu and the rest. The Tao of knives in the 25 layers of void spun crazily, becoming one with the knives in Qin Mu and the rest's hands. They transformed into a long knife that was stunning beyond compare, clashing with the 2 Bloodfiend dragons. Merging of battle skills? Feng Xian had just thought of this when incomparably bright knife lights were transmitted into her eyes. Her eyes instantly turned pitch black and 2 rows of black blood flowed down from her eyes. She couldn't help being astonished, and the knife lights in storm whizzed over and swept her up. Knife cleaves bright moon ring. Seeking Tao cleaves clear sky. But I have to take care of it with my long knife and not teach the ghosts and gods to provoke the world. In the storm, Feng Xian heard loud and bold shouts one after another. It was as if a warrior was holding a saber and fighting between heaven and earth. She did everything she could to protect herself in the storm and leave this place. She was terrified and uneasy. Lunatics. They are all lunatics who don't care about their lives. On the god-slaying platform, the saber lights collided again and again. Suddenly, Feng Xian felt an extremely powerful throb. She immediately sent her primordial spirit out and looked over with her primordial spirit. She saw that the god-slaying platform had become extremely bright. It was a phenomenon caused by the great Tao of God execution platform being stimulated. In the sky, the two blood-fiend evil dragons crossed their necks and cut down, shattering 25 layers of void and wiping out all the marks. The 5 figures on God execution platform turned into nothingness in the blood light. Even Heavenly Venerate Mu is dead? Feng Xian was astonished and thought to herself, if Empress Tianfei knew about this, she would probably be worried to death. After all, Heavenly Venerate Mu is the chief of the Heaven Alliance. If he dies here, however, she didn't know how happy Qing Tianfei would be if she heard the news of Qin Mu's death. She would be dancing and singing. However, before Feng Xian's thought could fade away, she saw the light circulating on God execution platform. Qin Mu and the rest had recovered from the state of destruction. Feng Xian was flabbergasted, and only then did she remember that Qing Tianfei had once been angry and scolded a scoundrel. She went forward to ask who the scoundrel was, and Qing Tianfei said it was Heavenly Venerate Mu. At that time, Feng Xian did not know why concubine Chang Tian would say that Celestial Master Mu was a scoundrel. However, when she saw the scene on the god-slaying platform, she finally understood what a scoundrel meant. Feng Xian no longer looked at the battle on God execution platform, and hurriedly found a divine city. This divine city was the territory of Liao Tian concubine. When the guard saw Feng Xian getting injured, he couldn't help but be shocked and hurriedly went to look for a famous doctor to treat her. The other injuries on Feng Xian's body were easy to deal with, but her eyes were injured and her eyes were destroyed. Even the divine doctor couldn't treat her. Madame Feng will have to wait for some time. I heard that there are famous doctors who are proficient in the path of creation and eternal peace, so I can invite them to treat you, madam. Feng Xian said. Feng Xian was enraged and shouted, eternal peace is full of traitors. Wouldn't inviting them to treat me be a disgrace to Empress? Could it be that you can't find a famous doctor who is proficient in the path of creation in heavenly court? I can't find one. The divine doctor was rather straightforward. Eternal peace has the art of good fortune and also the profound skill of good fortune. Emperor's seat level techniques aren't prohibited for outsiders to learn. However, eternal peace's profound skill of good fortune is based on heavenly river divine treasure. If the people of heavenly court don't cripple divine bridge divine treasure and cultivate heavenly river once again, who will be able to learn it? Feng Xian couldn't help but be suspicious and thought to herself, I've seen the Empress use the profound skill of good fortune and it was clearly obtained from eternal peace. Why can't we cultivate eternal peace's profound skill of good fortune? I have another method that can cure Madame Feng. The divine physician said, as long as I remove 2 divine eyes from others, I can dig out the bad eyes for her and replace them with new ones. However, the new eyes aren't the eyes of an emperor's throne expert, so I'm afraid that your majesty will have to refine them again before she can recover to her peak state. Feng Xian shook her head. My eyes have been tempered by me over and over again. If I want to change a new pair of eyes, I'm afraid I'll need dozens of years to cultivate them to their peak state. I'd better go and ask the famous doctor of eternal peace. The divine doctor agreed. Feng Xian waited quietly for more than 10 days and felt the fluctuations coming from God execution platform becoming stronger and stronger. Her primordial spirit would often leave her body and look at God execution platform. She could see that the collision between the path of the blade and the 2 blood fiend divine blades was becoming more and more intense. As time passed, the power of the path of the blade became stronger and stronger. Even here she could clearly feel the power of the blade. Eternal peace is truly a strange place. It's clearly a small place, yet its paths, skills, and divine abilities are flourishing. This blade Tao is clearly a postnatal Tao, yet it can contend against blood fiend. She was rather puzzled. Even an emperor who was proficient in the great Tao of the innate realm wouldn't be able to last so long on God execution platform. For example, she was an emperor who was proficient in the great Tao of the innate realm. If she were to ascend to God execution platform, she would only be able to last 1 strike at most, and the second strike would kill her. Chang Tian concubine had once told her that the murderous aura accumulated on the god-slaying platform was too strong, and it was about to turn into 2 divine sabers. When these 2 divine sabers were born, they were at the level of a supreme treasure. They were the world's #1 malefic weapon. and their power surpassed the azure heaven-glazed pavilion. When these 2 divine sabers matured, they could even kill a heavenly venerate. Qing Tianfei's goal was to subdue the 2 divine knives and use them to get rid of her strong enemies. Even though these 2 divine knives had yet to mature and were only tangible, Qin Mu and the rest were actually able to hold on until now under the power of the divine knives. It was truly an anomaly. Feng Xian waited for a few more days before her heart suddenly moved. The power of the 2 divine knives on God execution platform seems to be much weaker. She didn't know if it was just her imagination, but her primordial spirit immediately left her body and observed carefully. Suddenly, the 25th heavenly Tao of sabers had another heavenly Tao. Could it be that the heavenly venerate Mu and the other's Tao realm has increased, causing their cultivation strength to increase greatly? Feng Xian observed carefully and calculated if the power of the 2 divine sabers on the god-slaying platform had decreased. After recording it down, a few more days passed. She couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. The power of those 2 divine knives is indeed a little weaker. Heavenly Venerate Mu and the other 5 are taking the opportunity to seize the power of the divine knives and refine the baleful qi to take it for themselves. She suddenly stood up with a surging killing intent and thought to herself, I have to report to Empress Tianfei, or else those 2 divine knives will be even further away from maturity. I don't know when I'll be able to nurture them. Just as she was about to head to the Great Spirit Energy Bridge to report to Empress Qi Tian, the divine doctor suddenly came to report, Madame Feng, the famous doctor from Eternal Peace has been invited. Feng Xian's heart was slightly anxious as she said, Invite the famous doctor in and quickly diagnose me. If he can cure my eyes, I'll give him a huge reward, but if he can't cure my head, I'll kill him. I still have something important to see Empress, so I can't be delayed. At this moment, a gentle and magnetic voice that was unique to Min was heard. It caused her heart to involuntarily become calm. Madame Feng, there is no injury in this world that I cannot cure. Madam, don't worry. Your injury is easily cured for me. Feng Xian's heart pounded violently. She felt that this voice was extremely pleasant to the ears. She quietly left her primordial spirit and looked towards the doctor. The doctor was tall and sturdy, full of heroic spirit. He was dressed in green, but he was wearing a bronze mask on his face. Under the mask was a pair of eyes that moved people's heartstrings. He seemed to be able to speak, and what he said was heartwarming words of love. Famous doctor of eternal peace, why are you wearing a mask and not daring to show your true face? Feng Xian asked with a smile as the anxiety in her heart disappeared. The man in the bronze mask didn't hide anything and said, Reporting to Madam, I have an ugly appearance and I'm afraid I might scare the patient, so I used a mask to hide my ugliness. Feng Xian smiled. You're lying. Your eyes are so pretty, so you definitely can't be that ugly. In front of me you don't have to wear a mask. I don't trust the person wearing the mask, especially the famous doctor who treats my illness. The bronze-masked man hesitated for a moment and said, Madam has unparalleled eyes. Actually, it's because I'm handsome and afraid of attracting unnecessary trouble, so I often use a mask to cover myself. He smiled bitterly and said, I often practice medicine everywhere, and I have many debts of love, so I'm quite miserable. Feng Xian was even more curious and insisted that he take off the mask. The bronze-masked man was helpless, so he could only take off the mask and said, Madam, the heart of a doctor is the heart of a parent. Please treat me as a doctor, madam. When the mask was taken off, Feng Xian's primordial spirit felt as if it had been electrocuted. She felt that the world was nothing more than beautiful, and it was all concentrated on the man in front of her. Madam, I'd better put on my mask, the man said. Feng Xian hurriedly stopped him and said with a smile, You treat me while I admire the beauty. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? What's your name? The man stepped forward and their faces were almost touching. Feng Xian could clearly feel the touch of his breath, and her heart couldn't help but beat faster. Others call me apothecary. As for my previous name, it has long disappeared with my past. The apothecary smiled gently, he said. The injuries in Madam's eyes are Tao injuries. Tao injuries left behind by Blade Tao and murderous aura. The divine doctors of the heavenly court treat the superficial wounds but not the root. Although they have healed the superficial wounds, the murderous aura has not been removed by Madam, and will affect her Tao heart. However, I can remove the murderous aura for Madame. I can also heal the Dao injuries in Madame's eyes. His gentleness was as sweet as honey. It entered her heart. Feng Xian said softly, "As you wish." On the god-slaying platform, the saber light was like a tide and the Dao was like the sky. The two blood evil dragons were fighting around the layers of sky. They were extremely powerful, but their power was no longer as great as when they were at their peak. A few days later, the 27th Skyblade domain was formed. The two blood evil dragons' power weakened even faster. At this moment, Feng Ziyan was immersed in the handsome pharmacist's gentle home. She was unable to extricate herself and completely forgot about this matter. The fourth day had arrived. Dare I ask, fellow Taoists, do you still have tickets? The blood-colored murderous aura of God execution stage was refined by Qin Mu, Butcher, and the other three and stored in their bodies. Their cultivation became stronger and stronger, and their comprehension of the realm of God execution stage also became deeper and deeper. Their attainments in the path of knives also rose like the rising tide. The path contained in God execution stage wasn't the path of knives, but the path of murderous aura in the great Tao of heaven and earth. At the same time, it also contained the tempering of Tao heart. Refining the baleful qi and forcefully seizing the power of blood fiend divine knife could only raise their cultivation, allowing them to have a deeper understanding of the Tao of baleful qi. It couldn't raise their attainments in the Tao of knives. The reason why they had such a huge improvement in the Tao of knives was actually because of the improvement in their Tao heart, and during the process of resisting the divine knives of baleful qi, they had comprehended their own knife skills and knife Tao, thus obtaining an improvement. Among the five of them, apart from Qin Mu, everyone had deficiencies in the tempering of their Tao hearts. If it was any other time, they wouldn't be able to enter God execution stage. Just the test of their Tao hearts alone, they wouldn't be able to withstand the slaughter of God execution stage. However, Qin Mu's Tao heart was strong enough. Surging River comprehended Tao, and the five of them had their essence, qi, and spirit refined into one body. They used knife path to brand the 25 layers of void space, which was also led by Qin Mu's Tao heart. He forcefully raised Butcher, Shahuali, and the rest's attainments in Tao hearts. Butcher and the rest were able to stand on God execution platform by relying on Surging River comprehended Tao, and knife Tao to brand 25 layers of heavens. If it was Qin Mu alone, he wouldn't be able to stand on God execution platform. The power of the two blood fiend God execution knives was too strong, and even though his Tao heart could withstand it, his corporeal body and primordial spirit couldn't be preserved. His great Tao would also be slashed. If he stood alone on the platform, he would only be killed time and time again, unable to comprehend. Even though his Tao heart was strong, his attainments in knife Tao were still slightly weak. Surging River comprehended Tao, and the reason why he could imprint 25 heavens on knife Tao was because of the collaboration of the other four ancestors of knife Tao. It wasn't the work of just one person. Only when the five of them joined hands could they reach such a height and have the ability to resist God execution platform. And now, their saber Tao was branded in the 27th layer of the void, relying on the five of them working together to borrow the power of the God-slaying platform and gather their intelligence to raise their saber Tao to the height of the 27th layer of the void. They needed the five of them working together to be able to activate the power of the 27th layer of the saber Tao. The five smelly cobblers still could not compare to one founding emperor. Founding emperor used his own strength to deduce his sword Tao to the 35th layer of the void, and branded it into the 35th layer of the void. He was much stronger than them. However, their knife path was still improving and was about to break through 28 heavens, imprinting knife path into 28 layers of void. However, the further they went, the more difficult it became. It wasn't easy to raise it to 28 heavens. The power of the two blood fiend Godslayer knives on God execution platform was still extremely strong and posed a great threat to them. Butcher and the rest still needed to do their best to resist the two knives, but even so they were still continuously injured. Fortunately, Qin Mu's divine treasure territory contained difficult divine arts, so he could always restore them to their peak condition before God execution platform took away their qi and blood. Meanwhile, in the distant divine city, Apothecary was taking care of Feng Xian's body to get rid of the murderous aura in her body. He also brought her to some treasured lands in the ancestral court to gather medicinal herbs, preparing to refine spirit pills and miraculous medicines to treat her eye disease. With this handsome pharmacist by her side, Feng Xian felt that time was passing by quickly. When they returned after collecting the medicinal herbs, they saw that the rain masters, water gods, river gods, and dragon kings from the various heavens had gathered next to the great spiritual energy mutual relocation bridge. Thousands of gods controlled the flood to cool down the great spiritual energy mutual relocation bridge. During this period of time, the Heavenly Court's Taoist school had adjusted the position of the ships that were dragging the Heavenly Court. The Heavenly Court was migrating again at a much faster speed. It wouldn't be long before Heavenly Court would completely move to the Ancestral Court. At that time, Heavenly River would change its path again, and the grand situation of the Ancestral Court in the immemorial era would be replayed. Apothecary refined the spirit pills and applied medicine on Feng Xian. He said softly, "Madam only needs to rest for a day or two to recover. I have left eternal peace for a period of time, so I have to go back." Feng Xian was reluctant to part with him and held his hand. "Even though I was conferred the title of Madam by the Imperial Court, my late husband has already passed away for a long time. If Mr. doesn't mind." Apothecary pulled out his palm without batting an eyelid. "Madam, I owed too many romantic debts in the early years, and now I only want to practice medicine everywhere to make up for the debts. Madam has feelings, but I can't bear it." Feng Xian was at a loss and let him leave. After another 2 days, the Dao wounds in Feng Xian's eyes disappeared. She opened her eyes and looked around listlessly. She felt that the magnificent landscape of the Ancestral Court had lost its color. At this moment, she suddenly noticed the god-slaying platform, and her pretty face couldn't help but change color. She saw that the murderous aura of the god-slaying platform was far less powerful than before, and the scale of the murderous aura had shrunk by nearly half. "Oh no, I have a heart full of love, but I am heartless. I was only thinking about spending time with that pharmacist, but I forgot about the proper business." Cold sweat broke out on her forehead. From afar, she could see that the Tao of the saber on the god-slaying platform was like the sky, branded with 30 layers of void. Layers upon layers, it actually held the 2 blood fiend divine sabers inside, trying to capture and refine the 2 divine sabers. And although the 2 divine sabers could break through the 30th layer of the Tao of the saber, they didn't have the same terrifying power as before, and could no longer threaten the 5 people on the platform. The power of 30 heavens of knife path was unparalleled. The 5 people stood on the stage, and whenever they combined their strength to execute their battle skills, their power would surge to the heavens, making the 2 divine knives unable to act ferociously. "If I let them continue, I'm afraid they will devour and refine those 2 divine knives, turning them into the knife chi in their bodies." Feng Xian immediately flew up and rushed towards Great Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge. On God Execution Platform, Qin Mu had already seen through the great Tao contained in it and modified his God Execution Platform. He had 19 heavenly palaces, and not only did he have to reconstruct the God Execution Platforms of the 19 heavenly palaces, he also had to reconstruct the God Execution Platforms in the Ancestral Court of his Spirit Embryo Divine Treasure. When these 20 God Execution Platforms were erected, he felt his cultivation increase once again, and his Tao heart became even more mellow. However, after the God Execution Platforms of the Ancestral Court were erected, the changes that they brought were slightly beyond his expectations. When they were formed, they actually absorbed the baleful qi from his body. The more killing sins one created, the more baleful qi would be wrapped around one's body. For example, back then, Earth Mother Primordial Lord had massacred millions of gods and devils in Mystic City, causing baleful qi to wrap around one's body and affect one's Tao heart. Earth Mother Primordial Lord's Tao and morals had been completely corrupted, and he had died at Qin Mu's hands in the end. It was the baleful aura that had taken effect. Ever since Qin Mu had left great ruins and entered eternal peace, he hadn't caused much killing sins, and his hands hadn't been stained with much blood. It could be said that he hadn't caused many killing tribulations in the past few decades. Even though his cultivation was strong, his hands were the cleanest among all existences with his cultivation. However, there were countless lives that had died at the hands of his brother Qin Fengqing. Just when Qin Fengqing was still an infant, he had already devoured countless souls, and Qin Mu's consciousness had yet to be born. Back then, when the two of them were still one, Qin Mu's baleful aura had been wrapped around his body, and all these lives had to be counted on him. Qin Mu was proficient in the great Tao of Yudu, so the baleful aura couldn't affect his consciousness. However, it wasn't a good thing to have so much baleful aura wrapped around him. Now, the moment God execution stage was formed in the ancestral court of his divine treasures, all the baleful qi gathered on it and turned into two bloody baleful knife lights that entangled endlessly. Not only that, the baleful qi of the God execution stage of the ancestral court of concubine Changtian was also devoured and refined by the God execution stage of his ancestral court to strengthen his body. Qin Mu could feel the power of his God execution platform becoming stronger and stronger, especially after the power of the two Blood Fiend God execution knives had been refined by him. The power of the two Blood Fiend God execution knives on his God execution platform had also increased by leaps and bounds. It was becoming more and more terrifying. Butcher, Tianshu, Luo Wushuang, and Jihuali also used this opportunity to rebuild their God execution platforms, but the benefits they obtained were not as great as his. Among the 5 people who had refined the baleful aura of the God execution stage of the ancestral court, 4/5 of it had been refined by Qin Mu, while the other 1/5 had been split by Butcher and the other 4. Even so, it was no small matter. There was no ancestral court in their divine treasures, only the God execution stage in their heavenly palace. It was already an amazing achievement for the 4 of them to split 1/5 of it. One had to know that the God execution stage of the ancestral court had accumulated the baleful aura since ancient times, and they had already refined half of it. This baleful aura was enough to make a qualitative leap in their heavenly palace's God execution stage. Especially Jihuali. Before he stepped into the God-slaying platform, he was still in the Jade Lake realm. Now that he had jumped into the God-slaying platform realm, the benefits he obtained were even more immeasurable. At the God-slaying platform realm, he already had few opponents. At the God-slaying platform realm, if a heavenly venerate did not appear, no one would be able to compete with him. Although Butcher, Luo Wushuang and Tianshu's realms did not increase, their God-slaying platform realm had become extremely stable. Their cultivation of their Tao heart had also improved by leaps and bounds. The benefits were also unimaginable. The baleful aura contained within their spirit-slaying platforms had increased the might of their sabers, and it had also greatly affected their Tao arts and divine arts. In addition, the spirit-slaying platforms had absorbed baleful aura. For Tianshu and Butcher, 2 existences that entered and left the battlefield. It had also resolved the hidden danger of their Tao hearts being affected by the surrounding baleful aura. The stronger their cultivation strength was, the faster they would be able to refine the 2 divine slaying sabers with baleful aura, and the more benefits they would receive. They only needed to give them another 3 to 5 months before they could completely refine the baleful qi of the God-slaying stage of the ancestral court and take it for themselves. They could even merge their battle skills together to reach the height of 31st heavens, or even 32nd heavens. When that time came, the 5 of them would most likely have the battle prowess of a heavenly venerate, and they could even be called little heavenly venerates at the very least. Of course, they had to work together to raise the Tao realm of Tao of Knives to that level. If they were to split up, even Qin Mu wouldn't be able to reach 30 heavens of Tao realm. Suddenly, Qin Mu felt the power of the 2 God Slayer knives on God execution platform increase by a huge amount. His expression couldn't help changing drastically, and he said in a deep voice, "Retreat!" His body moved, and his divine treasure domain blossomed layer by layer, bringing the other 4 people with him and retreating. At that moment, the power of the 2 God Slayer knives of murderous aura rose crazily, making their eyes turn crimson like blood. Endless sounds of battle rang out in their ears, deafening them and causing their ears to buzz. It was as if they had come to the battlefield of ancient times that could destroy the world. The 2 evil dragons slashed at them, one from the left and the other from the right, and they suddenly cut. Kacha! The space of the ancestral court trembled violently, and Qin Mu and the rest's eyes turned blood red. They even saw the 35 layers of void being sliced apart by the 2 God Slayer knives. This kind of power wasn't something that could be unleashed by the 2 God Slayer knives themselves. It was the result of an incomparably powerful existence pushing their power to the extreme. The power of the 2 God Slayer knives was too terrifying. If Qin Mu and the rest hadn't absorbed half of their murderous aura and allowed the two God Slayer knives to transform into their peak form, even celestial venerables wouldn't be able to withstand their power. If the divine knives were to become corporeal, then their power would probably be able to kill celestial venerables. Qing Tian consort. Qin Mu flipped his palm and took out Heavenly Venerateling's hairpin. His divine consciousness burst forth and turned into a world-shaking explosion as he shouted, "You allowed us to enter God execution stage, are you going back on your words?" He waved the hairpin and the power of the not easy divine art burst forth, looking like a fish in a net that was about to die. When he had executed the not easy divine art in his spirit embryo divine treasure, he had used the fragments of the not easy divine art and not the full power of the not easy divine art. If he executed the full power of this divine art, he would be able to stop time and space. He would be able to stop all material changes and even reverse the flow of the material changes. However, if that happened, even Qin Mu would become a not easy material and be trapped in this kind of divine art. He could save Heavenly Venerate Ling, but if he wanted to save himself, he would have to use the power of absolute beginning, which would also be a huge price for him. Just as he executed the divine art of not easy, Heavenly King Tianshu raised his imperial citadel divine knife and slashed down with all his might, creating a gate of heaven influence. He shouted, "Let's go to Yudu first." Now that the ancestral court was open, Yudu had also come to the ancestral court. Entering Yudu to hide was also a good plan. Heavenly King Tianshu was one of the few existences who could cultivate gate of heaven influence and open Yudu, which was why he was revered as the Heavenly King of Yudu. Furthermore, it was Earth Count who had personally bestowed the title of Heavenly King of Yudu to him. Qin Mu retreated and protected Butcher and the rest to enter Yudu. When Butcher, Tianshu, and the rest had just arrived, they saw two blood fiend dragons suddenly slashing over from the void. With a kacha sound they cut Yudu open. The four of them were astonished. The two blood fiend dragons had actually cut past their heads, causing their scalps to go numb and cold sweat to roll down their foreheads. Moore is still over there. Butcher was about to rush back when he saw that the gate of heaven influence had already been cut into pieces by the two blood fiend dragons, cutting off his way back. "Heavenly Knife, don't worry." Heavenly King Tianshu hurriedly hugged him to prevent him from barging in. What kind of cunning person is Heavenly Venerate Mu? He's also the chief of the Heaven Alliance and has the title of Heavenly Venerate of Immortality, so Kuang Tianfei won't kill him. Butcher was still struggling. Luo Wushuang also said, "Heavenly King Mu has a way to protect himself. He has been in the Heaven Court for so many years and he is still alive. There is something wrong with Heavenly King Tianshu's identity. If he is captured by Gue Tian concubine, he will definitely be sacrificed. Shahuali and I are traitors of the Heaven Court. We cannot be captured by Gue Tian concubine." Butcher stopped struggling. He looked around and saw that there was only darkness in Yudu. There were only demons swimming in the darkness. This place was not like other places. At least there were messengers of death in the other heavens to fetch the dead spirits. However, there were no messengers of death or ghost ships here. How are we going to leave? Shahuali was a little worried. Tianshu patted his chest hard. He smiled and said, "I am the Heavenly King of the Nether Capital, conferred by the Earth Count. My relationship with the Earth Count is very good. We are practically brothers. Don't worry if you follow me. I will bring you to see the Earth Count and have a good time." Shahuali believed him and could not help but cheer, wanting to follow him. Luo Wushuang hurriedly pulled him back and quietly shook his head. He said in a low voice, "That was in the past. Ever since he drank wine and carried the Imperial Citadel to cut off Earth Count's horn, Earth Count has not liked him." Butcher also nodded repeatedly. He whispered, "I heard from Moore that this fellow had been running for his life all the way and finally managed to escape to the great ruins of the world of the living. However, he was caught by Earth Count and held in his palm. Because it was the world of the living, Earth Count did not crush him to death due to the rules of Yudu. However, he did crush him for more than 20,000 years." Shahuali's face was ashen as he asked in a low voice, "Do we have any other way out of here? Unless we return to the ancestral court." Tianshu turned around. He chuckled and said, "However, when we return to the ancestral court, Empress Changtian will crush us to death. or she will send us to the god-slaying platform to kill us. Don't worry, don't worry. The grudge between me and the Earth Count has long been resolved by Heavenly Venerate Mu. Now the only thing left between me and the Earth Count is friendship, an iron-like friendship. More than 10 days later, Tianshu, Butcher, Luo Wushuang, and Jahuali were locked in the cage. Tianshu held onto the iron window and looked at the messenger of death resentfully. The messenger of death was expressionless. The paper boat carried 4 large cages and slowly floated towards the Earth Count. Beside the god execution stage of the ancestral court, Qin Mu watched as 2 blood-fiend god execution knives sliced past his head. The peachwood hairpin in his hand didn't strike out the divine art of not easy either. Qing Tianfei appeared on the god execution stage with an ashen face, and 2 blood-colored murderous aura swirled around her. Qing Tianfei gently raised her slender hands, and the rough dragon scales of the 2 blood-fiend god execution knives slowly slid across her palms. Qin Mu smiled at her and said, "Empress Tianfei." "Shut up," Qing Tianfei said fiercely. "Say one more word and I'll crush your bones and scatter your ashes. My primordial spirit will be sent to the ultimate void, and you will be trapped in divine consciousness, great overarching heaven forever." Qin Mu immediately shut up. Qing Tianfei was one of the few heavenly venerates who could deal with him. After all, she was Supreme Emperor, and her divine consciousness, great overarching heaven, was unrivaled in the world. Even Heavenly Venerate Yun's primordial spirit had been thrown into divine consciousness, great overarching heaven, let alone Qin Mu. Even if Qin Mu could use the divine art of not easy to break the net between life and death, he would only be destroying Qing Tianfei and wouldn't be able to harm Supreme Emperor's origin. Qing Tianfei looked at the 2 blood-fiend god-slaying knives and the corners of her eyes twitched. Qin Mu's eyes also twitched, and he couldn't help muttering in his heart. After a moment, Qing Tianfei let out a turbid breath and muttered, "This palace, how should I deal with you, Heavenly Venerate Mu? I was kind enough to lend you my god-slaying platform, but you were so greedy that you almost destroyed my supreme treasure." Qin Mu immediately said, "Dao brother, you also have bad intentions. You were planning to use this god execution platform to get rid of me, but you were afraid of being implicated, so you didn't come over. If I die here, you won't know how to avoid it." Qing Tianfei glared at him fiercely, and Qin Mu shut his mouth. Qing Tianfei's chest heaved up and down violently, and after a moment, she said something that made Qin Mu's hair stand on end. "You and the other 4 people have absorbed so much murderous aura from god execution platform. How many more people do this palace have to kill, and how many wars do I have to create to raise these 2 knives to their peak state?" Qin Mu shivered a few times. From the immemorial era until now, the Creator has been in continuous battles. The battles of all sizes are more than 10 million degrees, especially the battle of the Creator's destruction, which caused the destruction of the Creator in the ancestral court. The baleful aura from these battles was absorbed by god execution platform, which was why these 2 divine knives were raised. Concubine Gao Tian's gaze swept over and was incomparably cold. She said indifferently, "Heavenly Venerate Mu, how many more wars do you think I have to provoke before I can refine them?" Qin Mu's gaze flickered and he said, "The battle to conquer the Heavenly Duke is about to begin. Consort wants to refine god execution mysterious knives, so don't miss this opportunity." Qing Tian Consort gave a snort and let go of the 2 divine knives. She stood on the stage with her hands behind her back. The Battle of Xian Capital is the battle of the fallen Heavenly Duke. The Heavenly Duke is the prey of the Ancestor God King. The Ancestor God King gets rid of the Heavenly Duke and absorbs the power of the Heavenly Duke to become the new Heavenly Duke. If I go, wouldn't I be making enemies with the Ancestor God King? Qin Mu raised his head to look at the Heavenly Consort on God Execution platform. He probed. With just the Ancestor God King, he can't do anything to the Heavenly Duke. Furthermore, if the Ancestor God King absorbed the power of the Heavenly Duke, his cultivation and abilities would probably increase by leaps and bounds. It was also possible for him to become an existence with perfect realm in one go. At that time, would the Ancestor God King still be able to accommodate other heavenly venerates? Where did the killing intent come from? The place where the killing intent was the heaviest in the world was the place where the Heavenly Duke had fallen. Even if it was the Heavenly Tao, it had to move the killing intent for the Heavenly Duke. Qing Tianfei raised the tip of her brows and said, Continue. Qin Mu's spirit trembled. He said solemnly. When the heavenly Tao moves the killing intent, it will definitely be incomparably fierce. Consort, bring God execution platform and 2 divine knives forward and refine them into peerless supreme treasures. Your skills will suppress the heroes in advance. You can take the cultivation of the heavenly Duke, retreat and protect yourself. Why not? Concubine Dang Tian muttered to herself. Qin Mu's words had indeed moved her heart. The battle of the heavenly Duke's death would definitely be filled with killing intent. It wouldn't be inferior to the killing intent from the Battle of Bloodrust when the creator was wiped out back then. If she wanted to let the 2 God execution knives recover to their peak state and even form a perfect state with form and substance, she would have to go to Xian capital. Her ambition wasn't limited to this. She even wanted to take advantage of Heavenly Duke's death to insert the 2 divine knives into Heavenly Duke's body and take away his qi and blood. At that time, the 2 divine knives would definitely reach a perfect state and turn into supreme treasures that would be countless times better than before. However, Heavenly Emperor Mu, will you give me advice? Concubine Chang Tian smiled. Other people's advice is to dig a pit, but your advice is to dig out a heavenly moat. Furthermore, it's not a heavenly moat, but a series of heavenly moats. If you fall into your pit, even if you don't die, you will have to peel off a few layers of skin. She had a deep understanding of this. After Supreme Emperor escaped, he looked for Qin Mu and fell into the heavenly moat he had dug. Qin Mu had promised him primordial stones to stop heavenly venerate vast heaven, but in that battle, even Supreme Emperor's corporeal body was almost crippled. Later on, Qin Mu had only given him 3/4 of primordial stones. Later on, in the ancestral court, Qin Mu had given Supreme Emperor another idea. He had asked him to use the Void Mother Beast to lure Divine Emperor Lang Xian into making a move and plot against Lang Xian. In the end, Lang Xian was indeed plotted against by him, but Supreme Emperor was beaten until only his head was left. Supreme Emperor's head went to seek revenge on Qin Mu, and it was refined into a huge seal by Qin Mu with the 4 or Great Seal. Even so, Qin Mu was still helping Supreme Emperor with his idea with a warm-hearted look. When concubine Chang Tian thought of these things, she gnashed her teeth in hatred. However, even she had to admit that even though Qin Mu's idea seemed like a good one, there would always be all kinds of mistakes when it was implemented. It would become a stinky idea of a heavenly moat connecting to a heavenly moat. Qin Mu cried out in grievance. Consort, is there anything wrong with my idea just now? I'm thinking for Consort wholeheartedly and from her point of view. I have no selfish motives at all. Even though she didn't want to admit it, Qing Tian Consort had to admit that even though Qin Mu's ideas were always stinky, this fellow was indeed standing in her position every time. He was thinking for her wholeheartedly, and didn't seem to have any selfish motives at all. It was also because of this that she had fallen 3 times in a row, and almost couldn't climb out of the pit. Qin Mu looked at her earnestly. His gaze was filled with anticipation. Consort, think about it. You have refined 2 supreme treasures and seized the qi and blood of the heavenly Duke. Who else among the 10 heavenly venerables would dare to stand on equal footing with you? Who else among the 10 heavenly venerables would dare to kick their legs and wrestle their wrists with you? What heavenly Duke Shao? What founding emperor? He's not even fit to carry Empress's shoes. Heavenly Duke How can only be Empress's dog. All right. The more you say, the more ridiculous it gets. Empress Chang Tian waved her hand and said, Don't always look at me with an expression like you're expecting me to fall for your trap. I need to think about it carefully before deciding if I should jump into your trap. She walked back and forth, muttering to herself. Qin Mu whispered, Consort, this opportunity can't be missed, it won't come again. There's only one heavenly duke, if this one dies there won't be a next time. Qing Tianfei glanced at him and said in astonishment, You haven't left yet? Quickly go. I won't pursue the matter of you destroying my treasure, so don't come and disturb my mind. Qin Mu bowed deeply to the ground and turned around to leave. Behind him, Qing Tianfei stared at his back on God execution platform and raised her hand quietly. In the palm of her hand was divine consciousness, great overarching heaven divine art. However, she raised her hand and thought for a moment before putting it down again. However, before her hand landed, killing intent appeared in her eyes and she raised her hand again. However, she still didn't unleash her divine art, and was hesitant in her heart. Suddenly, Qin Mu fell to the ground with an "iya" sound and exploded with a bang, turning into a cloud of black smoke and dissipating. This kid sensed my killing intent and turned into demonic qi to escape. Qing Tian concubine put down her palm and sighed as she walked down from the god-slaying platform. Under the god-slaying platform, her bedroom had been destroyed, leaving only a door standing there. Alone. The door had not been destroyed because of Qing Tian concubine's seal. Empress Chang Tian came to the door and stopped to look at it for a moment before shaking her head and turning around to leave. Behind her, the door collapsed with a creak and shattered into pieces. Her seal was still completely worn out. Why is Empress frowning? Fang Ziyan went up to Empress Chang Tian and asked carefully when she saw her expression. Empress Chang Tian sighed and told her about Qin Mu's idea. Even though I know he doesn't have good intentions, I'm still partial to him and want to bring God Execution Platform to Mystic City. However, I don't know where the pit he dug is. It's really worrisome. Fang Ziyan thought for a moment and said, Empress, when Heavenly Venerate Mu talks to you, he only talks about the advantages and doesn't talk about the disadvantages. Empress, if you think about it in this way, you can seek the good and avoid the bad. Chang Tian consort's eyes lit up. She praised. You are indeed smart. This is a solution. Perhaps you don't have to jump into the pit. If I bring the god-slaying platform to Xiandu and purely borrow the murderous aura to improve the divine saber, then no one will stop me. If I insert the 2 divine sabers into the Heavenly Duke's body and steal the Heavenly Duke's qi and blood, then I will have offended the Ancestor God King. Fang Ziyan said. Although the Ancestor God King is very strong, his strength is not the best among the 10 Heavenly Venerates. Concubine Chang Tian smiled and said, That's the reason. Even if the Ancestor God King wants to compete with me, he can't compete with me. The only problem now is whether the other Heavenly Venerates will stop me. One Ancestor God King is nothing to worry about, but with the other Heavenly Venerates, I have to think about it. Fang Ziyan's eyes flashed as she asked, Your Highness, will the other Heavenly Venerates stop you? Or will they stop the Ancestral God King? Chang Tian concubine giggled and said, Ziyan, you are indeed smart. The other Heavenly Venerates are definitely wary of the Ancestral God King. The Ancestral God King is the son of the Heavenly Duke. If he obtains the Heavenly Duke's power again, he will definitely be unparalleled in history and become the strongest expert in the world. It will not be difficult for him to cultivate to the Heavenly Court realm. The others were wary of him. They would most likely ask for an equal share of the benefits, which gave me an opportunity to take advantage of. She smiled slightly. After refining the divine saber, the 10th Heavenly Venerate is nothing to worry about. When that time comes, it will be too late for them to notice me. She was in high spirits. She flicked her sleeves, which flapped in the air. Heavenly Venerate Mu thought that he had dug a deep pit for me, but he did not expect to help me instead. When that time comes, this little guy's expression will definitely be very interesting. Fang Ziyan complimented. Even though Heavenly Venerate Mu is crafty and an old fox, he's still far inferior to Empress. Qi Tianfei couldn't help being pleased and giggled coquettishly. A devil qi escaped far away from God Execution Platform, and sure enough, the devil qi condensed. Qin Mu walked out from the black smoke, and the black smoke followed him and entered his body like a swarm of bees. Soon it completely disappeared. Humans are greedy, so Tian concubine can't sit still. In the Battle of Xiandu, she would definitely fight with the Ancestor God King for the corporeal body of the Heavenly Duke. However, Tian concubine wouldn't have thought that it wasn't just the Ancestor God King who was eyeing the corporeal body of the Heavenly Duke. There was also Heavenly Venerate Hong. Qin Mu raised his head and looked up. He saw that more than half of the Heavenly Court had already descended on the Ancestor Court, and it had probably only happened in the past 10 days or so. Heavenly Venerate Hong definitely won't let the Heavenly Duke's corporeal body be lost. Heavenly Venerate Hong is the true old fox, and as long as concubine Ming takes action, it'll be hard for her to escape his plot. Eradicating the Heavenly Duke would definitely be an unimaginably fierce battle. Qin Mu didn't know how many of the 10 Heavenly Venerates would be dispatched, but he believed that Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven wouldn't. Even though Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven's abilities had recovered by quite a bit, he hadn't reached his peak state yet. Heavenly Venerate Shao would not appear even if he was exiled. As for the other Heavenly Venerates, how many of them would appear? Heavenly Venerate Su won't go. The Heavenly Tao of Xiandu will restrain her Great Tao of Hades, unless she can unify the Heavenly Tao and the Great Tao of Hades. She will most likely stay in the Heavenly Court to guard against the sneak attacks of the Founding Emperor, and the other 3 ancient gods and emperors of the Quadrupole Heaven. Imperial concubine Yen has the support of ancient god Taiji, and is very powerful. It is hard to say whether she will go. Divine Emperor Langxian has obtained a dried-up prehistoric Dao fruit. His strength has greatly improved and he will most likely go this time. This is a good opportunity for him to show off. 11th Heavenly Venerate Shirchilua will definitely go. He has just become a Heavenly Venerate, so he must seize this opportunity to establish his might. Otherwise, it will be difficult to convince the masses. And Heavenly Venerate Fire will definitely go. After all, he abhors evil and hates ancient gods the most. As for whether Heavenly Venerate Gong will go, it's hard to say. Qin Mu pondered over it for a moment. Earth Count couldn't go to Xiandu, so he couldn't join hands with the Heavenly Duke. Furthermore, Earth Count was most likely aware of the Heavenly Duke's plan, so he definitely wouldn't interfere in this matter. The only ones who could interfere were Founding Emperor, Lang Lang, and Heavenly Venerate Yu. With the strength of these 3 people and the 3 ancient gods, they might have the strength to fight. However, the 10 Heavenly Venerates of the Heavenly Court had the divine weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal, which restricted the 3 ancient gods and emperors from leaving their territories. Therefore, the ones who could fight were probably the Founding Emperor, Lang Tai, and Heavenly Venerate Yu. Or we can set up another battlefield and attack the Heavenly Court. We can use this opportunity to get rid of the other Heavenly Venerates who stayed in the Heavenly Court. At the very least, we have to get rid of Heavenly Venerate Hao. However, if that's the case, I'll have to give up on Heavenly Duke. If I get rid of Heavenly Venerate Void, I'll anger Earth Count. Qin Mu's heart sank. Giving up on Heavenly Duke in exchange for the deaths of Heavenly Venerate Clear and Heavenly Venerate Void, losing Earth Count as an ally was something he couldn't bear. In the Battle of Mystic City, just Founding Emperor, Heavenly Venerate Lang and Heavenly Venerate Moon won't even be able to protect themselves. Therefore, whether or not I can save Heavenly Duke will depend on Heavenly Venerate Yu. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. The great Tao that Heavenly Venerate Yu was proficient in was also the great Tao of Yudu. If he were to go to Xiandu, it would greatly suppress his Tao. In Xiandu he would face great danger. This was the reason why Qin Mu had judged that Heavenly Venerate Su wouldn't go to Xiandu. And it was also the reason why Heavenly Venerate Yu wouldn't go to Xiandu. I can't let Heavenly Venerate Yu take the risk. The sky of the ancestral court gradually darkened. Qin Mu composed himself and walked toward the 100,000 Black Mountains while thinking to himself, if he goes to Xiandu, his life might be in danger. Suddenly, ghost flames flickered in front of him, and a paper ship faintly appeared and floated in front of Qin Mu. Qin Mu stopped and saw an old man holding a lantern on the paper ship. The lantern's light shone at him. The old man got off the paper ship and moored it. He sat under the light beside the ship and quietly folded the paper man and paper horse. Qin Mu walked forward and walked past the paper ship, ignoring him. Mu. The fingers of the messenger of death were very nimble, and a paper horse quickly formed on his hand. You are lacking manpower right now, aren't you? He asked indifferently. Tianshu, Lua Wushuang, Zhehuali and Heaven Knife. I've caught them, and Earth Count is entertaining them. Tianshu said he wanted to leave. He said that if the 4 of them worked together with you, they would be able to unleash the power of 30 heavens of Knife Path. Even though they can't beat Heavenly Venerate, they can save their lives. Qin Mu stopped behind the ship with a complicated gaze. I've combined the battle skills of Knife Dao with them, so they do indeed have great power. The lowest cultivation among them is God Execution Stage Realm, so they are nothing in front of Heavenly Venerate. Even a strong practitioner like Tianshu, who is on the Emperor's throne, would be captured by the light of a lamp in front of me. Elder Messenger of Death didn't raise his head and stared at the paper figurine that was about to be folded. You even invited them, so why didn't you invite me? Are you looking down on me? Qin Mu shook his head. Your abilities are very strong, so I wanted to invite you as well. However, you cultivate the great Tao of Yudu, so you won't be able to display much of your abilities in Xiandu. You invited Founding Emperor, Heavenly Venerate Moon, and Divine King Lang. Elder Messenger of Death blew on the paper figurine, and it instantly came to life. Among the 9 Heavenly Venerates of Dragon Han, I admire Big Brother you the most, and Heavenly Venerate Moon has the best relationship with me. But do you know who talks to me the most? He raised his head and looked at Qin Mu on the other side of the paper ship. It's you. I've known Heavenly Venerate you for 1,000,000 years, and I've never spoken more than 10 sentences to her. She always speaks and I listen. His face that was full of wrinkles revealed a smile. But every time I see you I talk a lot. Do you know why? Qin Mu turned around. Heavenly Venerate you is a woman, so I can't say anything in front of her. Heavenly Venerate Royal is my big brother, so I respect him and keep it in my heart. I can't be bothered with other Heavenly Venerates. Elder Messenger of Death stood up. Only you are different. I treat you as a friend that I can entrust my life to fellow Taoist. You have nothing to do with Heavenly Venerate Royal, yet you are willing to risk your life for him, offending Heavenly Venerate Clear Prime Minister, Heavenly Emperor and Heavenly Court from then on with just one word from you. I could have waited for you in Yudu for 1,000,000 years just to wait for your return and resurrect Celestial Master Royal. And you did it now with just one word from you. I can accompany you to kill your way to Xuandu. Qin Mu looked at him, and after a moment, he revealed a smile. Someone once told me that Heavenly Venerate you was too simple. If he hadn't been in Yudu and had participated in the Great War, he wouldn't have survived until now. Your decision to walk out of Yudu is putting yourself in danger. Your life is in danger. In the past, every time Heavenly Venerate you made a move, he had his back against Yudu. He could advance or retreat, just like the Battle of the Jade Lake protecting Qin Mu. Heavenly Venerate you walked in Yudu, just like the battle between the Peach Forest and Heavenly Venerate Shao. Heavenly Venerate you could also enter Yudu at any time. However, if Heavenly Venerate you went to Xiandu, he wouldn't be able to avoid the enemy's attack in time and return to Yudu. If that happened, it would be dangerous for him. Heavenly Venerate you looked at him with a calm expression. However, after Heavenly Venerate Shao was exiled, I started to interfere in worldly affairs. There's my territory in the origin world. He was talking about the matter of him releasing Xia Wuqi and Mingya. Xia Wuqi and Mingya had established themselves in the origin world by relying on him. From then on, Heavenly Venerate you had started to interfere in the battles and couldn't be alone. Qin Mu was silent for a moment and he knew what he was thinking. Earth Count won't let you attack, he said. He won't let you put yourself in danger. Earth Count's dream was to get rid of his identity as Earth Count. He needed a fair person to replace his position. You are his candidate and the next Earth Count in his heart. The next Earth Count in Earth Count's heart was originally you, but later it was Qin Fengqing. He has also been grooming you and Qin Fengqing as the next Earth Count. Heavenly Venerate you said indifferently, I'm making a deal with Earth Count. I'll help him take care of Yudu while he preserves Heavenly Venerate Royal's corporeal body to protect my mother's soul. Qin Mu asked, if anything happens to you, what about your mother? She will live very well in Yudu. Qin Mu didn't say anything more and walked away. His voice came from afar. Heavenly Venerate you, Founding Emperor, and Lan here will appear in Mystic City. At that time you will meet them first. He suddenly stopped and thought for a moment. He said meaningfully, be wary of Celestial King Lang Bao. Don't let her come into contact with Heavenly Venerate Gong. If Heavenly Venerate Gong stayed in the celestial heavens and didn't participate in the Battle of Mystic City, it would be fine. If she did, she would definitely come into contact with Celestial King Lang Bao. If Lang Bao comes into contact with Heavenly Venerate Gong, you need to be wary of any changes. Heavenly Venerate you was slightly stunned and nodded silently. Qin Mu left. Go back and let Earth Count release Heavenly King Tianshu and the rest. I need their help in the Battle of Xuandu. Heavenly Venerate you revealed a smile and put away the paper man and paper horse before floating away on the paper boat. Qin Mu waited for him to return to Yudu and stopped to think carefully before shaking his head. God King Lang was the goddess in his dreams, perfect and flawless. However, Lang Lang wouldn't think of old friendships, nor would he hug them. She would use the interests of the race as the paramount principle, and would make a judgment that was beneficial to the race under the influence of the situation. If Heavenly Duke died and Qinmu's faction lost their strongest existence, the balance of power with 10 Heavenly Venerates would be broken. If she met Heavenly Venerate Gong, she would be easily convinced by him. She came to the conclusion that Qinmu's side couldn't win against 10 Heavenly Venerates, so she decided to join Celestial Master Gong's side. Celestial Master Gong was once one of the 3 kings of the immemorial era, and she was now one of the 10 Heavenly Venerates. It wasn't impossible for God King Lang to become one of the 10 Heavenly Venerates. If that was the case, in order to make a contribution, God King Lang would kill his own people. Under her sneak attack, Founding Emperor Celestial Master Yu and the rest might not be able to escape. In fact, the creator race might even make a move on Carefree Village. God King Lang was once the object of Qinmu's love, so he had to be wary of her. Qinmu felt very uncomfortable in his heart, but he had no choice. After another month, the Heavenly Court finally completely descended on the Ancestral Court. The vast and boundless Heavenly Court floated above the Ancestral Court and gave off an earth-shaking divine might. The Heavenly River also changed its course with the Heavenly Court and returned to the Ancestral Court. In the immemorial era, the Heavenly River was the most important river in the Ancestral Court, and it had only returned to its former position. However, the return of the Heavenly River caused a profound change in the structure of the universe. First, many of the heavens that were built on both sides of the Heavenly River suffered great changes. Originally, the stars in these heavens moved according to the tides of the Heavenly River. The Heavenly River changed its course, and the stars immediately became chaotic. The natural disasters that caused these heavens were incessant. The people were displaced and there were countless deaths and injuries. Secondly, the Heavenly River had once passed through the various heavens in the Yuan world. When the Heavenly River changed course, it caused these heavens to change course as well. They were torn apart and dragged by the Heavenly River. Some of the heavens were lucky. There were many powerful gods that fixed the stars when the Heavenly River changed course. They did not cause much damage to the people. However, some of the heavens were not so lucky. They were directly torn apart by the Heavenly River and turned into pieces of the universe. Many cold corpses floated in the starry sky. No one dared to complain. The Heavenly River changed its course and turned the great swamp of the Ancestral Court into a vast ocean. This was once the origin of Xiandu. Xiandu rose from here and became higher and higher, turning into the most vast sky. After the end of the Archaic Era, the Heavenly Court captured the Heavenly River, turning the Heavenly Sea that gave birth to Xiandu into a great swamp. Now that the Heavenly Sea had recovered, it became vast and deep. If one stood on the surface of the sea and gazed at the sea, one could see the reflection of Xiandu in the sea. This was Celestial Master Hong's territory. The Great Swamp was not even a treasure land, but Celestial Master Hong chose this place. However, the Heavenly River changed its course, turning this place into a heavenly sea, instantly making this place extremely rich. The vigorous vitality and strange heavenly Tao rules contained in the Heavenly Sea emerged, and the Great Swamp became one of the most eye-catching holy lands in the Ancestral Court. Celestial Master Hong's move caused the other Celestial Masters to cast sidelong glances at him. They could not help but admire his shrewdness. The most profound effect of the Heavenly River's change of course was that the Heavenly River had finally returned to Xuandu. The Heavenly River surged out of the Ancestral Court and flowed toward the top of Xuandu. It drew a beautiful arc and passed through Xuandu, forming an unsealed circle. Then, it flowed down from Xuandu and into the Yuan world. The path to Xuandu was opened by the Heavenly River. The conquest of the Heavenly Duke was already on the agenda. The military marquises of the Heavenly Court were ready to set off. The ships of the Heavenly River Navy sailed day and night to Xuandu. Behind them, there were countless smaller ships dragging their supplies. Along the way, the stars were lit up by powerful gods. They illuminated the Heavenly River and made the river look like a jade belt. The reason why they did not take the Psionic Bridge was that something had happened in Xuandu. The Psionic Bridge had been destroyed, and even the divine weapon of the Ancestor God King, Celestial Master Royal, had been suppressed by the Heavenly Duke. The Heavenly Tao is selfless, and the Great Tao is just. Rumors spread across the universe. The Heavenly Duke has fallen, and the Heavenly Tao is just selfish. The 10th Celestial Master wants to change the Heavenly Tao's public weapon for his own use. From now on, it will not be the public world but the private world. This is the sorrow of all living beings. Kings, nobles, generals born with guts, commoners, slaves for generations. From now on, you have to pay taxes to breathe the air, and you have to pay money to bask in the sun. This kind of rumor spread in the 10,000 worlds for a while. Someone used this matter to ask Heavenly Venerate Hong, and he said, "It's just the cry of the incompetent, don't bother about it." Sure enough, this rumor didn't cause much of a stir and returned to peace. At this moment, Tian Shu, Butcher, Zhehuali, and Luo Wushuang came to the 100,000 black mountains of the ancestral court and found Qin Mu. Qin Mu prepared himself and said to the four of them, "In this battle, life and death are hard to predict. I will live and die together with the public." Butcher smiled. "What's there to be afraid of?" In the heavenly court, 10 heavenly venerates including Hao Gong, Zhu, Hong, Hua, Yen, Chong, Lang, Su, and Shi gathered together to discuss the matter of Pingxian capital. Heavenly Venerate Hua asked, "Celestial Master Royal, the divine artifact of Xuandu, was suppressed by the Heavenly Duke, and the spiritual energy mutual shift bridge was destroyed. Do you know what happened, Ancestor God King?" Ancestral God King said, "The Heavenly Tao of Xuandu seemed to sense that the Heavenly Duke was about to die, so the Heavenly Tao stirred and sealed my divine weapon. As for the destruction of the psionic bridge, it was the millions of Sun Guardians on the Heavenly Duke who received the Heavenly Tao's order and gathered together to form a rebellious force. They attacked the psionic bridge and destroyed it. Before the Heavenly Duke died, he still wanted to kick his legs." Heavenly Master Su sneered. "But that was in vain." Heavenly Master Hong quickly said, "Don't underestimate him. The Heavenly Tao will not let the Heavenly Duke die. Even if the Heavenly Duke wants to die, he can't. The Heavenly Duke is born from the Heavenly Tao and represents the operation of the Heavenly Tao. When necessary, the will of the Heavenly Tao will completely replace the will of the Heavenly Duke. It will even be strengthened by the Sun Guardians in Xuandu, which will greatly increase their strength. There are millions of Sun Guardians in Xuandu. These Sun Guardians are usually responsible for the operation of the suns in the major worlds. If the Heavenly Tao is strengthened by them, they are indeed a big force." Celestial Master Gong said, "However, other than the Sun Guardians, there are also Moon Guardians and Star Lords in Xuandu. If they are also strengthened by the Heavenly Tao, this force cannot be underestimated." Heavenly Venerate Hong smiled and said, "Heavenly Venerate Gong, do you want to go to Xuandu?" Heavenly Venerate Gong hesitated for a moment and shook his head. "The Heavenly Court can't be left unguarded. I'd better not go." Heavenly Venerate Fire was impassioned and said in a clear voice, "How can I not go? The Heavenly Duke has done many evil deeds and caused trouble for the world for a long time. If I don't kill him, I will be conniving and an accomplice." Heavenly Venerate Gong smiled and said, "Heavenly Venerate Fire abhors evil and cannot tolerate the slightest bit of sand in his eyes. I admire you very much, but the Heavenly Court is also very important, and cannot be left unguarded against the sneak attacks of the Qin bandits. If I stay here, I can also take care of them." Heavenly Venerate Hao smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Gong, it is difficult to hold on by yourself. I will also guard the Heavenly Court just in case. My 2 imperial concubines, what do you think?" Concubine Ming Tian smiled and said, "There are Heavenly Venerate Hao and Heavenly Venerate Gong here to ensure that everything is safe. Then I will make a trip to Xiandu." Concubine Yen Tian's eyes flickered and she smiled and said, "There are still 3 extremes in the 4 extreme heavens that have yet to be pacified. I plan to intimidate the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, and Black Tortoise to prevent them from causing trouble again." Heavenly Lord Su said, "You have to guard against Hades too. I'll stay behind to guard against the chaos in Hades." Heavenly Lord Hao looked at Lang Xian again. Divine Emperor Lang Xian quickly said, "I have to go. If all of you don't go, it'll be bad if something happens." Heavenly Lord Hong smiled and said, "The Heavenly Duke's strength can be said to be the perfect existence of the great Heavenly Court in Xuandu. He's no weaker than the Heavenly Emperor. I have to go and help the Ancestor God King." Shi Qilua said, "I created the divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal, so I have to rush over to break the Heavenly Duke's suppression.
Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven smiled.
Since that's the case, I'll leave the Battle of Xiandu to you guys. I'll stay here with Heavenly Venerate Palace, Heavenly Concubine Yen, and Heavenly Venerate Void. Here, I wish the 6 fellow Taoists a victory in advance. Everyone smiled knowingly. Heavenly Venerate Hao had always been arrogant and looked down on the other Heavenly Venerates. If there were any benefits, he would definitely take the lion's share. After the battle with Supreme Emperor, he had been chased by Qin Mu for 600,000 miles and lost his reputation. Now that Heavenly Venerate Hao had become humble and courteous, it seemed like his injuries had not fully recovered. In the Battle of Xiandu with Ancestor Hong, Hua, Chong, Lang and Shi, the 6 Heavenly Venerates would definitely be able to deal with the Heavenly Duke easily. Even if Founding Emperor, Heavenly Venerate Yu, and the others intervened, they wouldn't be able to change anything and wouldn't affect the overall situation. Suddenly, Heavenly Venerate Hong asked, "Then what about Heavenly Venerate Mu?" Heavenly Venerate Mu has a very good relationship with the Duke of Heaven. He will not sit idly by. Heavenly Venerate Haotian said, "In Tianzi will stop him. Don't worry, Taoist Hong." Everyone stood up and left. Only the Heavenly Venerate of the palace stayed behind and asked Heavenly Venerate Haotian, "Is Heavenly Venerate Haotian really so calm that he wants to stay with me in the Heavenly Court?" Heavenly Venerate of the palace did not hide anything from her. "I have not fully recovered from my injuries after the battle with the Supreme Emperor. I am only barely able to keep up appearances. If I really go to Xuandu, I am afraid that I will have to reveal my true form. Moreover, I do not have the divine weapon, Heavenly Venerate of the palace, so I cannot compete with them. Heavenly Venerate of the palace, on the other hand, you are well cultivated and in your prime. Why do you want to stay behind?" Celestial Master Gong said, "I have no idea about the Heavenly Tao. It's the same whether I go or not." Celestial Master Hao laughed and suddenly coughed violently. He took a moment to catch his breath. He said, "Celestial Master Gong is still as calm and composed as before. I admire you. I thought you would fight for something for my brother Lang Xian. After all, you are his mother." Heavenly Venerate Gong's pupils contracted slightly, and he said with a smile, "Heavenly Venerate Hao must be joking." Heavenly Venerate Hao didn't continue. "The imperial family is all heartless. No wonder you don't like my brother. Back then, I was the one who invited you to become the 10th Heavenly Venerate and the one in charge. Heavenly Venerate Gong, you still owe me a favor." Heavenly Venerate Gong was silent. Heavenly Venerate Hao smiled. "Our interests have been tied together for a long time. Our alliance is unbreakable. Only I can accommodate your creator clan. Gong, do whatever you want to do now. I'm behind you." Celestial Master Gong thanked him and left. Heavenly Venerate Hao was at ease. His fingertips tapped on the armrest of the throne. At this moment, a woman's figure appeared behind him. Her voice was filled with charm. She said softly, "Heavenly Venerate Gong has the weakness of the Creator, so she can't get rid of your control. You can use her to break apart the Emperor and Lang Bao. You can also use her to get rid of Lang Xian. You can also use her to deal with Emperor Tai in Absolute Beginning. She is the woman among the 10 Heavenly Venerates who can truly give you control over everything. If you use her well, you will have supreme power. Moreover, my Taisu Divine Mind is also in her hands." "Thank you for your advice, Aunt. Don't worry, Aunt. I will definitely get the Taisu Divine Mind for you." Heavenly Venerate Haotian smiled and looked at the woman who looked like Madame Yuanmu with some infatuation. "Aunt, I haven't recovered to my peak state yet. The Battle of Xuandu is extremely important. The important thing is not how to kill the Heavenly Duke, but how to divide the benefits. If I don't go, I won't be able to get any benefits. I will only help the Ancestor God King. The Ancestor God King is stubborn and willful. Once he gains power, he will force us to submit to him. So you will definitely go to the Battle of Xuandu." The woman was Tai Su. Because Heavenly Venerate Haotian was thinking of Madame Yuanmu, he took on the appearance of Madame Yuanmu. He said gently, "Now that you want to increase your strength and recover to your peak state, your primordial spirit is still trapped in the divine sense of Emperor Tai. This is a good opportunity for you to escape. Even if you get a part of the Heavenly Duke's magic power, You can use it to break through the divine sense of great all-heaven. Please grant me my wish, Aunt. Heavenly Venerate Haotian said in a deep voice. Goddess Tai Su wore a loving smile that was full of maternal power. She smiled and said, Beg me. You know the rules. Heavenly Venerate Haotian knelt down and kowtowed to her with a fanatical look. He kissed the tip of her feet, but his eyes were extremely calm. Goddess Taisu smiled and said, If you beg me, I will naturally agree to it. Don't worry, I will go with you. I will bring my supreme treasure and ensure that you get the greatest benefit. Because the stronger you are, the happier I will be. On the heavenly river, Qin Mu, Butcher Tianshu, and the rest were sitting on a fast ship. The cabin was filled with fine wine, and Heavenly King Tianshu was so anxious that he scratched his ears and cheeks. From time to time, he would want to open a jar and drink to his heart's content. However, Butcher used the face of his knife to slap his hand away. Drink sparingly. Luo Wushuang said coldly. You are as timid as a mouse, and you only have this ship of wine. You still have to wait for Heavenly Venerate to give you courage. If you drink all of it on the way, you will only be scared shitless when facing Heavenly Venerate. Heavenly King Tianshu sneered. I will be scared shitless? That's right, I will be scared shitless. Luo Wushuang, how can you not be scared when facing Celestial Venerable? Luo Wushuang looked at his divine knife and said indifferently, I won't. Ever since I broke the God in my heart, no matter who is standing in front of me, they will not be able to stop me from using my knife. Tianshu grunted and said, After drinking wine, so will I. Shahuali sat on the side of the ship and looked at Qin Mu. He suddenly smiled and asked, Cultmaster Qin, what realm are you on now? I realized that after you went to heaven, you didn't accomplish nothing. Your cultivation has become much more profound. 9 prisons platform realm. Qin Mu thought about it and said, It's roughly equivalent to your Jade Capital realm, but I have 5 supreme realms more than all of you. Everyone couldn't help being curious and went forward to ask. Qin Mu explained, There's only one realm for me from the beginning to the end, and that's Spirit Embryo Divine Treasure. My Spirit Embryo Divine Treasure realm is divided into 2 realms. One is Dao Realm, which is the 36th Heavenly Dao Realm system. The other is Great Ancestor Court Realm. Dao Realm and Great Ancestor Court Realm are actually intertwined together. As Cultivation Realm increases, so does Dao Realm. The Great Ancestral Court Realm is divided into the Heavenly Palace Heavenly Court Realm and the 5th Supreme Realm. The Heavenly Palace Heavenly Court Realm is the Heavenly Palace Heavenly Court system that you cultivate. However, my Heavenly Palace Heavenly Court Realm is different. I have developed the realm of the 9 prison platforms, which is 1 realm higher than yours. However, I have yet to figure out how the Jade Capital realm in the Ancestral Court is divided. I have yet to see the Jade Capital of the Ancestral Court. It is also unknown whether the Jade Capital realm includes Lingxiao and the Emperor Throne. As for 5th Supreme Realm, I'm still trying to figure it out. I've already cultivated the 4 Supreme Masters and comprehended a few divine arts. I've comprehended a few heavens of Dao Realm. It's also unknown whether I can form 5 different realms. Qin Mu pondered for a moment and said, That's more or less the case. The other 4 were already dumbfounded and couldn't speak for a long time. Shahuali stuttered. You comprehended this in the Ancestral Court?
Qin Mu smiled.
If you guys go to the Ancestral Court, you should go to the 4 great heavenly gates of the Ancestral Court, Jade Lake Jade Stage and 9 Prison Stage. The 5 of us working together can reach the 30 heavens of Dao Realm. But when we split up, everyone's Dao Realm isn't high. The highest is still me, the 26th heavens of Dao Realm. If you can walk through all these places, most of the Dao Realm will be able to catch up with me. He paused for a moment and added, Most likely we will still be a bit off, but not by much. Shahuali was so excited that he rubbed his fists and said, If I can come back alive from Xuandu this time, I will definitely go there. Pa. It's a great fortune. Tianshu spat out a few mouthfuls of saliva and said, Children speak without fear. Don't say such unlucky words. Qin Mu revealed a confident smile. This time, in order to protect ourselves, Heavenly Dao only needs to come to Xiandu. Heavenly Dao can sense our Dao hearts, and with the support of Heavenly Dao, our abilities will increase by another step. It might not be impossible for us to survive. adding Founding Emperor Lang Lang, heavenly venerate you and heavenly venerate you. With the help of these strong practitioners, we will definitely be able to turn danger into. Before the word "e" could be said, Qin Mu looked ahead in a daze. Everyone hurriedly looked forward and saw a sword on the waist of a middle-aged man walking toward them along the heavenly river. It was Founding Emperor Qin Yi. Founding Emperor came to the front of the ship and stopped. Butcher and the rest immediately greeted him while Tianshu hid in the cabin and didn't dare to show his head. Qin Mu hurriedly stopped the ship and stretched out half of his body to ask, "If you didn't go to Xiandu, why did you come here?" Founding Emperor's expression was calm as he said leisurely, "You asked me to come to the Ancestral Court and said that it was to comprehend Tao realm in the Ancestral Court and could help me break through to the ultimate void, so I came." Qin Mu said angrily, "At this time you should be preparing to go to Xiandu and not the Ancestral Court. What did you do earlier?" Tianshu's face turned ashen when he heard that. There was probably only one person in the world who dared to speak to Founding Emperor like that. Ever since Founding Emperor had created a few celestial venerables in the meeting of Heavenly Alliance, even the 10th Heavenly Venerate had been polite to him. Founding Emperor didn't mind and said, "The 10 Heavenly Venerates were all here previously, so I didn't have a chance. Now that they are rushing to Mystic City, I have a chance to take a look at the Ancestral Court." Qin Mu was about to speak when Founding Emperor continued, "Rushing from Heavenly River to Mystic City will take some time. I'll go after comprehending the Ancestral Court, but it's still in time. You guys hold on for now." Qin Mu gritted his teeth and watched him walk toward the Ancestral Court. "Qin Yi, remember to collect my corpse." He called out to Founding Emperor's back. "Okay," Founding Emperor said indifferently. Qin Mu took off his shoes and threw them over. Founding Emperor turned his head, and the shoes missed and flew back, automatically covering Qin Mu's feet. "Stay here for now. Go to the Ancestral Court and do something for me." Qin Mu put on his shoes and sent his divine consciousness into Founding Emperor's mind. He told him about the matter, and Founding Emperor stopped in his tracks. He turned his head to the side and said, "It's a little difficult." Qin Mu asked solemnly, "Can you do it?" "I can give it a try." Founding Emperor raised his feet and left. Qin Mu snorted and said solemnly, "Let's go." Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Tianshu also popped his head out from the cabin. "How?" Qin Mu gritted his teeth. "Use your head to block it." Tianshu immediately shrunk his head back. The cheerful atmosphere on the ship had vanished without a trace, and everyone was gasping for breath. Butcher took a mouthful of heavenly river water and sharpened his knife by the side of the ship. He smiled. A Founding Emperor raised sword path to 35 heavens, but the few of us who used knives could only raise it to 30 heavens. Could the path of knives be inferior to the path of swords? Everyone, it's up to man. Even so, they still couldn't feel at ease. At that moment, a faint zither melody came from the front. It was beautiful and moving, making the heavenly river jump along with the zither melody. Qin Mu rose into the sky and looked forward. He saw the vast heavenly river jumping like musical notes with hidden killing intent. The waves that jumped along with the melody contained a strange divine art that was compatible with the river water. When they met a boat, they would rush out, making the surface of the heavenly river hide killing intent. Its heavenly venerate used zither music. Qin Mu looked into the distance and saw the god and devil army pushing out divine weapons and 4 emperors to suppress the heavenly river, making heavenly venerate use zither music unable to unleash its power. Among the god and devil army of the heavenly court, a heavenly venerate suddenly flew up and charged at heavenly venerate you. That heavenly venerate had a tall and sturdy body, and his muscles were like boulders. His curly beard spread out in anger, and he looked extremely mighty. He was none other than Heavenly Venerate Shirchiluo. The 2 Heavenly Venerates fought and walked in the starry sky, circling the heavenly river from top to bottom, slowing down the footsteps of the gods and devils of the heavenly court. So that's how it is. Founding Emperor wanted Heavenly Venerate you to slow down the marching speed of the heavenly court, giving him enough time to comprehend the 4 Heavens Gate, Jade Platform, Jade Lake, and other places of the ancestral court. Qin Mu came to a realization. Only Heavenly Venerate you could slow down the marching speed of the heavenly court. Her divine arts could come and go, so it was extremely difficult to trap her. Qin Mu relaxed, and the fast ship quickly caught up with the heavenly court's army of gods and devils. The army of gods and demons was responsible for transporting supplies and heavy weapons. Among the heavy weapons there were vermilion bird, black tortoise, azure dragon and white tiger, two of which belonged to the four emperors. They should have come from the Creator's heavenly palace. As for the other heavy weapons such as the divine city, the god-slaying platform, the giant seal, the large-scale formation map, the cauldron, the formation flag, and the pill furnace, they were all huge. Each of the divine weapons could fill a huge turreted ship. The supplies were all kinds of divine weapons, spirit herbs, and even hundreds of ships that were filled with slaves. They were probably for the gods and devils at the front line to enjoy. Today, the water on the river was surging, and the speed of the turreted ship was greatly reduced. The two heavenly venerates in front were chasing and killing each other, making it difficult for the heavy supplies army to advance. Qin Mu drove the fast ship through the sky. Just as he passed the fleet, he saw Shirchilua rushing back. When he saw him on the ship, he couldn't help being stunned and stopping his footsteps. Qin Mu greeted him, and Shirchilua returned the greeting. His voice was like thunder as he asked, "Heavenly Venerate Mu, are you going to die?"
Qin Mu smiled.
"As the chief of the Heaven Alliance, I have to get rid of the Heavenly Duke. I have to personally take charge." Shirchilua sighed and said, "You have something that others admire. If you stop me on the battlefield of Xiandu, I won't be merciful." Qin Mu smiled and said, "Madam." Shirchilua glared at him, but Qin Mu changed his words. "Heavenly Venerate Shir, I hope you can forgive me on account of our past friendship." Shirchilua spat at him and skipped away. Butcher and the rest stared with their eyes wide open and stared blankly at this heavenly venerate who had left in the form of a young girl. They couldn't speak for a long time. Qin Mu said, "This is Madame Yuan Mu, the goddess of destruction of Sinkhole, Heavenly Venerate Hao's mother. Because she was killed by Heavenly Venerate Ling, her three souls attached themselves to the rock for a long time and became a spirit. However, she became a man." Butcher was silent for a moment before letting out a turbid breath. "What a strong warrior!" Zhehuali, Luo Wushuang and Tianshu nodded their heads repeatedly. They continued forward and the small boat flew for a few days before they heard the sound of a zither. In front of them were the 10 guards of the heavenly court. All of them were the elites of the elites, and their chi filled the sky. The lowest cultivation among them was Jade Capital Realm, and there was no lack of existences with Ling Zhao's perfection among them. The 10 guards had come out at the same time. This was the importance they placed on Xiandu. The 10 guards of the heavenly court are going to deal with the Sun Guardian, Moon Guardian.
Quin mues geis flitskeret.
The abilities of the 10 guards of the heavenly court were incomparably strong. Even if Heavenly Venerate Yu's zither music stopped them, it wouldn't pose much of a threat to them. However, the 10 guards were escorting a treasure with blazing flames. It was the 9-layer sacrificial altar of Tao fire that had given birth to the vermilion bird of South Pole Heaven. Qin Mu's pupils constricted and he looked forward. The one fighting with Heavenly Venerate Moon was Heavenly Venerate Fire. The battle between Moon and Fire was much fiercer than the battle between Shirchilua and Heavenly Venerate Moon. Shirchilua didn't want to fight to the death with Heavenly Venerate Moon, so he didn't use his full strength and didn't use his divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal. However, Heavenly Venerate Fire was different. Heavenly Venerate Fire had used almost all his methods and his attacks were incomparably fierce. Even the divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal was mobilized by him to work together with him to encircle Heavenly Venerate Moon. Suddenly, the sound of a zither rang out. Heavenly Venerate Moon plucked the zither strings, causing the heavenly river to tremble violently. One sound after another split apart the starry sky, and Heavenly Venerate Moon disappeared. Heavenly Venerate Fire roared in anger, and flames spewed out of his mouth. They burned through the layers of void, but he couldn't catch up to Heavenly Venerate Moon. He could only turn back. Qin Mu rowed the small boat and brushed past him. The two of them didn't look at each other, as if they were strangers. The small boat continued forward for more than 10 days, and met a huge army led by Celestial Emperor Lang Xian. This army was the direct line of descent of Celestial Emperor Lang Xian, and they were all the leaders of the demigods of various races. However, they were also held back by Heavenly Venerate Moon.
Celestial Emperor Lang Xuan was incomparably calm.
He fought with Heavenly Venerate Moon, and the Jade Lake Jade platform of the ancestral court recovered to its original state. He had obtained the Tao fruit of a strong practitioner from the previous universe epoch, and his abilities were becoming more and more perfect. Qin Mu's pupils constricted slightly. The current celestial emperor Lang Xian had cultivated the path of divine consciousness, and innately won qi to perfection. He had even comprehended more than one finger of divine origin. Qin Mu saw that when he was dealing with Heavenly Venerate You, he had executed at least 4 different primordial divine arts. Clearly, he had obtained great benefits from that shriveled Tao fruit. Heavenly Venerate Moon was even more dangerous when facing him than when facing Heavenly Venerate Fire. Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's path of absolute beginning could use divine consciousness to interfere with her divine arts, but it could also threaten her life. Qin Mu came not far away and asked in a loud voice, "Celestial Emperor, do we need to lend a hand to get rid of you and I together?" Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's heart trembled, and the muscles on his back tightened. Instantly, Heavenly Venerate Moon found a chance to escape and left. Qin Mu rushed forward and asked angrily, "Why did Divine Emperor let her go?" Divine Emperor Lang Xian turned around and said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "If it wasn't for you locking me down with knife qi, how could she have escaped? Heavenly Venerate Mu, you've done well." Qin Mu laughed loudly and said proudly, "I've done well. Divine Emperor, that Tao fruit." Divine Emperor Lang Xian glanced at him and gave a cold snort. "If you dare to spread the word, I'll make you regret being born in this world." "Your Majesty." When Divine Emperor Lang Xian heard the word Your Majesty, he couldn't help beaming with joy. "There's no need to be so ostentatious. Forget it, I won't bother with you. Don't go forward, Son of Heaven Een is waiting for you in front. I don't want to lose a treacherous official." Qin Mu thanked him and left on the ship. He pondered over it in silence. Looks like that Tao fruit has indeed raised Divine Emperor Lang Xian's abilities, but it has still affected his temperament and even his consciousness. Strange. He clearly comprehended a deeper level of the absolute beginning Tao, which means that his cultivation of the Tao realm will only improve. Logically speaking, his Tao heart will only become more and more transparent. Why would it be affected by my Your Majesty? He was puzzled. The cultivation of the Tao heart would increase in both wisdom and thinking. However, Divine Emperor Longshuan's wisdom seemed to have decreased. This was something he could not understand. Heavenly Venerate Mu, I finally know why you were able to survive in the celestial heavens. Shahuali spoke quickly and sneered. You have already entered the path of flattery and cultivated the heavenly palace of flattery. Qin Mu spat and Luo Wushuang said coldly, Speak human words to others, speak ghost words to ghosts. Heavenly Venerate Mu is a good hand. The two of them had a common enemy and choked Qin Mu, making him feel a little better. Everyone was chatting and laughing, but no one mentioned the matter of Yin Tianzi waiting for them in front. They passed by the army commanded by Heaven Concubine Gao. Even though the battle between Heaven Concubine Gao and Heavenly Venerate You was very interesting, it was clear that neither of them had used their full strength. Heaven Concubine Gao deliberately went easy on Heavenly Venerate You and allowed her to leave. Qin Mu exchanged greetings with Heaven Concubine Gao and used his identity as the chief of the Heaven Alliance to encourage her to make even greater contributions to the Heaven Court. Thus they continued to move forward. Everyone on the ship teased Qin Mu for seeing people talking nonsense. Everyone burst into laughter. On the heavenly river in front of them, there was a heaven gate of the nether capital standing tall. Hundreds of ghost-faced turrets stopped on the river and formed a formation on the surface of the water. In the middle army of the heaven gate of the nether capital, there was a grand hall that was resplendent with gold and jade. Son of Heaven Een was sitting on the throne. He was enjoying the singing and dancing. The butcher glanced at Tianshu. Does the heavenly king want to drink? Tianshu held the divine saber on his shoulder and laughed out loud. To beat the Earth Count and the Heavenly Venerate, I have to get drunk. But to beat the Een Dynasty Hibiscus, there's no need to drink. It's not like I'm afraid of him. At the same time, the founding emperor arrived at the ancestral court and walked up to the heavenly court. He looked down on everyone and barged into Jade Capital. He climbed up to the Lingxiao treasured palace and with a flash of sword light, he beheaded the ancient god Heavenly Emperor. It really is fake. The founding emperor kicked away the corpse on the emperor's throne and sat on it. He placed the carefree sword on his knees and closed his eyes to focus and regulate his aura. Heavenly Venerate How, I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to kill the Heavenly Venerate of the palace on someone else's request. The founding emperor did not open his eyes and said unhurriedly, you can leave if you don't want to add more injuries to your injuries. Also, you can create another Heavenly Emperor. I'll kill this one. It was quiet outside Lingxiao Palace. After a while, the sound of footsteps could be heard. The founding emperor sat still. His eyes were still closed and he did not open them. Heavenly Venerate Hao's injuries had not fully recovered. Even with Taisu's help, he did not dare to go against him. There are 3 Heavenly Venerates left in the heaven: Concubine Yen, Heavenly Venerate Hao, and Heavenly Venerate Gong. Heavenly Venerate Hao has retreated, but when he returns, there will be 3 Heavenly Venerates working together. Founding Emperor thought to himself, Heavenly Venerate Mu said that Concubine Yen has Ancient God Taiji's help, and Heavenly Venerate Hao has Ancient God Taisu's help. He wants me to seriously injure Heavenly Venerate Gong. He really thinks highly of me. He placed his right hand on the hilt of the carefree sword. He did not seem to use any strength, but veins were already popping out. He heard the sound of footsteps. It was the footsteps of a woman. He had already clenched his little finger on the hilt, followed by his ring finger, middle finger, and index finger. Outside the skyscraping hall, Heavenly Venerate Gong strode into the hall. His pupils constricted as his gaze landed on the headless body of the ancient god Celestial Emperor, and the head that had fallen to the side. On the emperor's throne, founding emperor opened his eyes. He pressed his thumb on the hilt of the sword and pulled it out with a clang. The sound of the sword resonated throughout the skyscraping hall. The moment he pulled out the carefree sword, he had already arrived in front of the Celestial Master of Palace. The first move he made was the 35th heaven of the Way of the Sword. The 35th heaven of the Way of the Sword, the Supreme Sword Domain, exploded in an instant. Within the Lingxiao Palace, the sword light seemed to fill up the palace where the gods worshipped the Heavenly Emperor in an instant. In the next moment, the surging and majestic sword light pierced through the Lingxiao Palace. There were still countless gods and demons living in the heavenly court. They raised their heads at the same time and looked at the Lingxiao Palace in unison. Under their stunned gazes, tens of thousands of sword lights burst out from the Lingxiao Palace, which symbolized the supreme authority of the Heavenly Emperor. The sword lights were indestructible and pierced through the Lingxiao Palace. They shot out from all directions. The stunning sword lights cut through the sky, leaving deep and unfathomable spatial cracks in the sky. Boom! A loud explosion came from the Lingxiao Treasured Palace. The Heavenly Venerate Gong was wounded in dozens of places, and quickly retreated out of the palace. At this moment, the sword light that shot out from the palace and pierced through the sky actually tore through 35 layers of void space. In each of those cracks that went straight to the 35 layers of void space, there was a shadow of the founding emperor. He held a sword and charged out from the 35 layers of void space. That was the founding emperor's brand of sword Dao. He had branded his sword Dao into the 35 layers of void space. The sword lights that came out from the Lingxiao Treasured Palace earlier were not simply piercing through the void space. They were also activating the brand of sword Dao in the 35 layers of void space. The sword lights that flew out from the palace earlier numbered in the thousands and flew in all directions. But now, these sword lights were activating the brand of sword Dao in the 35 layers of void space. The power of each sword light was stronger and more shocking. Celestial Master Gong, who was retreating rapidly from all directions, attacked. Celestial Master Gong mustered all her strength to resist, but she only had enough time to block the 100 sword lights before she heard a sizzling sound. A divine sword stabbed out from her back and pierced out from her front. Celestial Master Gong spat out blood and gritted her teeth to resist desperately. However, more sword lights pierced through her. In front of her, Founding Emperor walked out of the Lingxiao Treasured Palace with the carefree sword in his hand. There was no change in his expression, as if the attack that injured Celestial Master Gong was just a casual attack. The Lingxiao Treasured Palace had already become riddled with holes, and was in an extremely dilapidated state. His Dao realm was profound and incomparable. He had long surpassed the Supreme Emperor. In the late stage of the Supreme Emperor realm, he relied on the power of sacrifice to push his divine sense up to the ultimate great overarching heaven of the void. In the Tao realm, the comprehension of the Supreme Emperor had long been left behind by the founding emperor. He stood there as if he was standing in the 35 layers of void. His figure was difficult to grasp. When he moved, it was as if the sword Tao in the world moved along with him. It was as if the 35th layer of the void sword Tao also moved along with him. This was the peak of the sword Tao that village chief said could not be scaled or surpassed. The more sword Tao experts had a high understanding of the sword Tao, and the deeper their understanding of the Tao realm, the more they would see a figure standing in front of them. It was lofty and tall, as if it was standing in the sky. There were many sword path experts in the world, but there were too few who had cultivated to the level of village chief Su Mumu. Those who could sense the supreme majesty of founding emperor's sword path were even rarer and could be counted with one's fingers. Even Qin Mu couldn't sense the might and majesty of founding emperor's sword path, let alone the others. However, as long as he could feel it, he would feel like he was looking up at a lofty mountain, and he would need to break the god in his heart. Village chief Su Muzhai had been quiet all these years because he wanted to break the spirit in his heart. He wanted to break the despair and oppression that the founding emperor's sword Tao had brought to him. However, up until now, he had never been able to break the spirit in his heart and walk out of the low point. Even the sword god, who had been stunning and resolute all those years ago, could not walk out of the shadow of founding emperor for a moment. At this moment, founding emperor did not only give off the feeling of looking up at a lofty mountain, he also gave everyone, including celestial venerables, the feeling of looking up at a lofty mountain. In the 20,000 years after the founding emperor era ended, he did not sink. Instead, he sank into Carefree Village. All the gods and demons in Carefree Village, and even their descendants, had lost their Tao hearts. However, his Tao heart remained the same as before and had never been defeated. There were no fellow Taoists who supported and encouraged him. There were no fellow Taoists who supported him. Even his former comrades in Carefree Village had misunderstood him and did not understand his good intentions. Yet even so, his Tao heart had never declined and never wavered. From ancient times until now, he was the only one who had such strength and determination. This was the reason why he could comprehend the 35th heavens of Tao realm. The Tao of divine consciousness of heavenly venerate Gong burst forth, and her divine consciousness was good at branding the void. Her Tao of divine consciousness was even better at illusions. At that moment, layers of illusions burst forth and surged toward founding emperor. It was easy for her illusions to confuse Qin Mu, but they were completely useless against founding emperor. For an existence who had created a kind of great Tao and had almost completely grasped it, illusions couldn't confuse a person's Tao heart because they couldn't confuse sword Tao or sword heart. Heavenly venerate Gong suffered a few more strikes, and despair rose in her heart. She asked in a hoarse voice, "Qinyi, why do you want to kill me?" The founding emperor did not answer. He suddenly sheathed his sword and left in a flash. Whoosh! A sinkhole great abyss suddenly appeared where he had been standing and devoured the sky and ground there. The founding emperor had just left that place and the sinkhole great abyss had not been able to devour him in the slightest. Boom! Another Taiji diagram appeared. The yin and yang qi was like a dragon with its fins and cut at him. The founding emperor had just walked past the yin and yang pair of scissors, and the yin and yang qi had cut through the air. The Taiji diagram was erected horizontally in front of him. Founding emperor pulled out his sword and stabbed out, tearing a large hole in the Taiji diagram and piercing through it. Suddenly, an ancient bell descended from the sky and shook with a bang. The sound of the bell was vast and mighty as it rolled down. A streak of sword chi shot up into the sky above founding emperor's head and advanced layer by layer, turning into 35 heavens. At the top was the clear jade realm sword domain. The vast rivers and mountains were as if they were made of jade, supporting the large bell. The bell rang, but it was unable to break through the 35th heaven. Ancient god Taiji, a man and a woman, appeared in front of the founding emperor along with concubine Yen Tian. A Taiji sand table was erected behind their heads, and they were somewhat hesitant. The founding emperor held the hilt of his sword upside down and greeted the two of them. The two ancient gods returned the greeting, but when they raised their heads, there was no trace of him. Why don't the two of you leave him behind? Concubine Yin Tian asked in confusion. If we leave him behind, we'll be injured as well. Ancient God Lunar said. This fellow Taoist is even stronger than us in terms of Tao realm. It's just that he's not at the innate level, so forcing him to stay behind will be disadvantageous to us. Ancient God Sun said. He's an existence that's about to become a Tao expert. He makes people envious. Imperial concubine Yin Tian's heart shook. Achieving Tao. This word was often mentioned by the Taiji ancient god, and his words were filled with envy. The founding emperor was not invincible. If they used their full strength, they could still keep the founding emperor. However, the Taiji ancient god was not willing to attack again, and she could not keep the founding emperor just because of concubine Yen and heavenly venerate Haut Yen who did not want to show up. Heavenly consort Yen was slightly puzzled. A postnatal creature was actually envied by ancient god Taiji, an existence that had the same origin as Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning, and he directly said that he was about to attain Tao. Could it be that our path is really wrong? Heavenly Consort Yen had mixed feelings. Heavenly Venerate Royal had created the cultivation system of Heavenly Palace, and Qin Mu and Heavenly Venerate Vast had passed down the teachings of Heavenly Venerate on behalf of him. The cultivation system of Heavenly Palace would be the path of cultivation for countless creatures in the millions of years to come. Even Imperial Concubine Yen was a Tao seeker on this path. She had immersed herself in the system of Heavenly Palace for too long. When Founding Emperor walked out of Carefree Village, he had said that he had created the cultivation system of Tao Realm at that time. The 10 Heavenly Venerates had thought that the cultivation system of Tao Realm was a supplement to the system of Heavenly Palace. Even though they had taken it seriously, they hadn't paid too much attention to it. But now, ancient god Taiji had actually said that Founding Emperor was about to become a Tao, even before ancient god Taiji had. This made her feel all sorts of feelings lingering in her heart. There was bitterness, and she was unable to walk out of this blow for a moment. Heavenly Venerate Gong stood up unsteadily, and when she looked back, Founding Emperor had already disappeared without a trace. Founding Emperor wouldn't have come to kill me for no reason, so who made her attack me? Qin Mu's figure suddenly appeared in her mind, and she made a judgment in her heart. She flew up in a stagger and returned to her heavenly palace in a panic. She was prepared to immediately enter closed-door cultivation to remove the injuries caused by Sword Path. That moment, Heavenly Venerate Vast's voice entered her ears. Founding Emperor was invited by someone to kill you. Fellow Taoist Gong, you can't be unable to guess who that person is, right? You helped Qin Mu become the Alliance Master of Heavenly Alliance, but this ally of yours betrayed you. Heavenly Venerate Gong, can you endure it? She didn't know when he had appeared in Heavenly Venerate Gong's heavenly palace and walked over. The seal that Heavenly Venerate Gong had set up seemed to be completely useless to him. Vaguely, Celestial Master Gong saw a shadow moving behind him, but her injuries were too severe to be seen clearly. Heavenly Master Hao came to her. He said with a faint smile, Celestial Master Gong, Supreme Emperor betrayed you, Absolute Beginning betrayed you, and your son, my elder brother, Divine Emperor Langxian, also betrayed you. Now Celestial Master Mu, who you consider an ally, has betrayed you. Have you thought about the reason behind this? Celestial Master Gong's body swayed. He said coldly, I have never regarded Celestial Master Mu as an ally. We are merely using each other. I do not have a deep relationship with Supreme Emperor. The reason why I married him was because the Nongxin clan and the Juyu clan had a marriage alliance, which was beneficial to suppress other races. I do not have any relationship with your father, Absolute Beginning. I only used him to take revenge on Supreme Emperor. As for your brother Langxian, he was just an accident. I don't have any feelings for him. Heavenly Venerate Haotian smiled. This is the reason why you are injured so many times. You only use your relationship with everyone and don't have any real allies. No one would dare to treat you wholeheartedly. Heavenly Venerate Gong snorted and didn't say anything. She was an ancient godly monarch in her previous life and a heavenly venerate in this life. She had a high position and authority, so she couldn't lower her head and admit her mistakes. Heavenly Venerate Haotian smiled and said, You keep saying that you are not a creator and that you no longer have a race. However, Heavenly Venerate Mu wants to kill you. Have you thought of the reason? Heavenly Venerate Gong suppressed his Dao injury and said calmly, he is afraid that I will meet Godly King Lang this. Heavenly Venerate Haotian smiled and said, then will you meet Godly King Lang this? Heavenly Venerate Gong was silent for a moment. He raised his head and said resolutely, yes. This battle of Mystic Capital is the best time for me to meet King Lang. I have boundless power now, but I am still alone among the 10 Heavenly Venerates. I have no allies, so I need the Creator, the power of the Creator race, and Langar to assist me. Most importantly, I now have the capital to keep the Creator alive. More importantly, you still think of yourself as the Creator in your heart, as the Palace God King. Heavenly Venerate Hao's words exposed her heart. He said coldly, you've never forgotten the glory of the Creator, you've never forgotten that you're the 3 kings of the immemorial era, and you've never given up on your race. If you cannot forget your hatred for Tai Di and Tai Chu, then you cannot forget that you are the Creator. Now that you are seriously injured, you can no longer go to Lang Er. Heavenly Venerate Gong said bitterly, I need an ally. Wrong. Heavenly Venerate Hao said coldly, you need someone to pledge your loyalty to. You need to submit. In the past, you had the room to bargain with me. Now, you no longer have the right to do so. Belong to me, worship me, and I will heal your wounds and let you return to your peak to see Lang Er. He stood in front of Celestial Master Gong and stretched out his hand. With an unquestionable tone he said, if your Creator race wants to survive in this universe, they can only rely on me. Relying on you won't work, relying on Lang Er won't work, and relying on Celestial Master Mu won't work either. I can let you return to the glory of God King, and let your Creator regain the glory of the past. Kneel down, worship me, and kiss the back of my hand. I will pull you up from the abyss. Heavenly Venerate Gong looked at the palm that he stretched out, and she could faintly see the shadow behind him. However, she still couldn't make out the appearance of that shadow. Her gaze dimmed down. On the heavenly river in the small boat, Qin Mu, Butcher, Zhehuali and Tianshu burst into laughter. They were in the form of unrestrained skeletons, and each of them was holding a jar of wine. They were laughing so hard that their eyeballs were about to pop out. Son of Heaven Een! Tianshu laughed until his nostrils and eyes were spewing out wine. He panted as he said, this fellow established the underworld capital, and there are sculptures of Earth Count everywhere. Also, the face of Earth Count was carved into a totem and painted everywhere. Qin Mu laughed so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. Every time he saw Diua, he would run away with his tail between his legs. He even said that he wasn't afraid of her. He had been a gigolo ever since the beginning of the Dragon Han dynasty. His underworld capital's Heaven Gate was completed by Diua. This fellow licked his face to curry favor with Diua, and plotted against him on their wedding night. He even stabbed him in the back. I heard that he also plotted against Empressine with his pale face. The butcher laughed so hard that he could not breathe. He said in a thunderous voice, some people even said that he was the face of the Empress in the palace. Could it be that he is the Heavenly Emperor and Empress Hao? Zhehuali spat out 2 wine arrows from his nostrils and laughed so hard that he almost peed his pants. Pig butcher, didn't you see the look on Prince Yin's face? Look, his face is pale again. He is still pretending to watch the singing and dancing. The small boat approached the Heaven Gate of the Nether capital, and the laughter of the 4 of them became even louder as they kept glancing at Yin Tianzi. Luo Wushuang was still experienced and wasn't used to such an occasion, so he didn't participate in it. Yin Tianzi supported his chin with his hand and turned his body to look at the song and dance in front of the Heaven Gate. The laughter of Qin Mu and the rest could be heard by his ears, and they were all talking about his embarrassing matters. There were some that weren't, and all sorts of disgusting things were piled on his head. You didn't see the situation when I beheaded him in the underworld capital. Tianshu smiled and said, I beheaded him in the underworld capital's Heaven Gate, and it was just a matter of 1 knife. This fellow's abilities are low, and without relying on Empress Hao, how could he have survived until now? Bah! The smile on Yin Tianzi's face stiffened and his other hand had already crushed the armrest of the throne. Shut up! At least give him some face in front of his army of the underworld capital. Qin Mu laughed until he burst into tears. He panted and said, you didn't see the scene when he saw my brother in the land of Great Void. That's called embarrassing. I killed his son, killed his beloved wife, and even beat him until he was pissing his pants in front of the 4 heavenly masters and 4 heavenly kings of the heaven court. Shut up. Intienzi could not hold it in any longer. He stood up abruptly and his voice was shrill. He said sternly, Heavenly Venerate Mu, did I give you face? To tell you the truth, I am here in the name of Heavenly Venerate how to stop you from going to Shangshuan capital. If you insist on going, this place will be your burial place today. Zhahuali laughed and said, Heavenly Venerate how? It's Empress How, right? The 4 people on the small boat burst into laughter. Even the serious Luo Wushuang could not help but smile. How dare you? Intienzi could not hold it in any longer. He rose into the air, his clothes fluttering in the wind and his red robe fluttering in the wind. 4 heavenly palaces floated behind him. The gate of heaven of the nether capital was majestic, and 4 heavenly palaces appeared in the gate. There were a total of 8 heavenly palaces. He rushed toward the 5 people on the small boat and said sternly, Today I will send you 5 bastards to your deaths. He crushed them in the air in front of the army of the nether capital of the northern sky. He wanted to establish his prestige in front of his own army. He didn't rely on the strength of others to ascend to the position of Black Emperor of the nether capital. He relied on his own true ability. Although he wasn't a heavenly venerate in the heavenly court, he was still a little heavenly venerate of the 8 heavenly palaces. Intienzi's power was overwhelming. Before he arrived on the small boat, the expressions of the 5 people on the small boat suddenly changed, and they became extremely solemn. The 5 figures crossed each other, and in an instant 30 layers of void were cut open. A divine blade slashed down from the sky. Intienzi's head was cut off, his body was cut off, and the heavenly palace behind him was split open. The Ming capital's heavenly gate was also split into 2 halves. The expression on Son of Heaven Yin's face had yet to freeze. Was as if he hadn't expected the abilities of the 5 of them to be so terrifying after joining hands. He had indeed not expected it. Even though Qin Mu had said that he had beaten him until he was pissing his pants in front of the 4 heavenly masters and heavenly kings of the celestial heavens, in reality, the one who had been beaten until he was pissing his pants was Qin Mu. If Qin Mu hadn't forced Bai Yuqiong to make a move, it was really possible for him to be killed by Son of Heaven Yin. However, that was then and now. Qin Mu's abilities had an earth-shaking improvement compared to that time. He had cultivated to Dao Realm 26 heavens, and his cultivation realm had also come to 9 prisons platform. In the Battle of Taiji Star Field of the Ancestral Court, he could face Empress Dowager head-on without being defeated. He had barged into the God Execution platform of the Ancestral Court without dying. When he joined hands with Butcher and the other 5, he had even raised his Dao realm to 30 heavens and branded his great Dao into 30 layers of void. Qin Mu, who had cultivated to this step, was filled with confidence. He even believed that the 5 of them could withstand 1 or 2 moves from Heavenly Venerate without being destroyed, which was why he insisted on going to Xiandu. Because Intienzi only had 4 heavenly palaces, he had to rely on the use of the Heaven Gate of the Nether Capital to have 8 heavenly palaces. When faced with such fierce 5 people, he naturally beheaded them with 1 strike. However, Intienzi's greatest strength wasn't his magic power nor his realm, but his great Tao of reincarnation and his divine art of reincarnation. Although he was cut in half by a single slash and even the small heavenly court formed by the 8 heavenly palaces was split open, the gate of heaven of the nether capital behind him was bursting with a strange power and forcefully closed the split door. When his corpse passed through the gate of heaven of the nether capital, a strange scene happened. The nether sea under the gate of heaven of the nether capital suddenly appeared. The surging seawater was made of black sand, which was extremely black. The waves of the nether sea surged and hit the gate of heaven. The moment Intienzi's body passed through the gate of heaven, his body disappeared. A demigod with a dragon's head and a turtle's back flew out from behind the gate. He stood on the surface of the sea. Back then, when Saint Woodcutter and the others rescued Due, Consort Tianyin Tianshu Yama, and the other experts besieged Intienzi, they fought 100 battles, but they still couldn't take down Intienzi. At that time they had killed Intienzi several times and damaged his body several times. However, Yin Tianzi was still able to use the Nether Capital's divine gate to restore his body. Once he passed through the Nether Capital's divine gate, it was equivalent to being reincarnated. Not only could men and women change at will, even species could change. This was the effect of the path of reincarnation. Yin Tianzi was shocked and angry. He raised his head and faced another blade light that descended from the sky. That knife light cleaved apart Mingdu's heaven's gate that had just gathered together and fell from the top of his new body. Heavenly venerate Mu, you motherf asterisk cur. Before he could even say a word, he was cleaved into two by a knife. He had borrowed the reincarnation of Mingdu's heaven's gate and was killed by Qin Mu, butcher, and the rest before he could even stabilize himself. Mingdu's heaven's gate rumbled and sank into the underworld sea along with Black Tortoise's corpse. The underworld sea suddenly disappeared and reappeared behind the army camp of the underworld capital of Northern Heaven. The underworld capital's heaven gate rose once again and Yin Tianzi was resurrected from behind the gate. The small boats rampaged and crashed into the army camp of the underworld capital of Northern Heaven. They crashed through the turreted ships and went all the way to the underworld capital's heaven gate. History illuminates the heart of Pill. On the ship, Qin Mu and the rest shouted out and executed 30 heavens of knife path together. When this knife cleaved out, it was as if what flew out wasn't knife light but countless gorgeous articles. Each and every one of them was filled with words and strokes that moved the hearts of the people. The Tao sound that came out from knife path wasn't as sacred, solemn, or profound as innate great Tao. The Tao sound that came out from knife path was like a scroll of human history being unfolded. All of the glorious and majestic figures stood up from the scrolls of history, majestic and vigorous. They shone with boundless light. Some used pens as knives to scold the injustice of the heavenly Tao, the incompetence of the sovereign, and the mistakes of the gods. Some used their bodies to carry out their actions. If the mountains blocked the way, they would move the mountains. If the floods came, they would open up a canal. If the rivers blocked the way, they would build bridges to cross. If the gods brought calamity, they would punish the gods. History reflected the heart of the elixir, carrying a heavy burden to carry it forward. The Netherworld Sea, the Netherworld capital's gate of heaven, and Yin Tianzi had just appeared when they saw a picture scroll that looked like history unfold. The knife light struck the god and struck the heart, vaporizing a large area of the Netherworld Sea, and shattering the Netherworld capital's gate of heaven. Yin Tianzi let out a shrill scream and vanished with the remaining Netherworld Sea. At that moment, the small boat rushed past Northern Heaven's Netherworld City's camp and appeared at the back of the camp. At the bow of the boat, the 5 of them held onto the hilts of their knives and looked around, only to see the last wisp of Netherworld Sea disappear. Turn around at the back. Qin Mu raised his foot and halted it heavily. The entire boat moved sideways on the surface of the heavenly river, and they saw them pass through Northern Heaven's Netherworld City's camp. At that moment, the gods and devils of Netherworld City and the camp all turned around. The Underworld Sea had already arrived behind the formation of the Underworld Capital Army. The dilapidated Underworld Capital's Heaven Gate once again stood up from the Underworld Sea. Yin Tianzi had reincarnated this time and transformed into a woman dressed in a red robe. Her hair was disheveled and her figure floated in front of the Underworld Capital's Heaven Gate. Qin Mu Tianshu, Shahuali Luo Wushuang, Dao Lu Zhao accept my bow. She shouted out sternly. The woman Yin Tianzi bowed, and Butcher and the rest were about to execute their divine arts of knife path when Qin Mu's expression changed drastically. He spread his cloak to protect the 4 of them and cupped his fists before pushing forward. He also bowed. Yin Chao Jin accept my bow too. Boom, a gate of heaven and earth appeared behind him, connecting heaven and earth. It reached up to Heaven Dao Profound Capital and down to Yudu. It was the second heaven of his divine arts that had entered the path. The instant Qin Mu bowed down, the 26th heaven of his divine arts entered the path, and One Chi Primordial Chaos Dao and Yu also bowed down at the same time. The 2 of them bowed down to each other across tens of thousands of gods and devils in Northern Heaven and Dark Capital. When Yin Tianzi bowed down, he saw the primordial spirits of the gods and devils in the turreted ships and sinister formations in front of her suddenly splitting into pieces. Their souls disintegrated and turned into black sand. Black sand spewed out from their eyes, ears, mouth and nose, and even their souls at their lower abdomen. After they were crushed, they spewed out smoke from their lower bodies. It was incomparably terrifying. Qin Mu pushed his hand forward and bowed. The gods and devils of Mingdu in front of him couldn't withstand his bow either. Their primordial spirits disintegrated and their souls exploded. Yin Tianzi used the divine art of Yudu, and Qin Mu's bow was also a divine art of Yudu. Their attainments were on par. Not only that, Qin Mu's bow contained a qi of primordial chaos that traveled together. Wherever he bowed, space would turn into dust, and the corporeal bodies of the gods and devils that he had killed would explode, turning into wisps of chaotic qi. Boom! The two divine arts collided, and the ship under Qin Mu's feet couldn't withstand the pressure and exploded. Qi and blood gushed out from the top of his head, turning into a sea of blood. The sea of blood seemed to have been burned and was bubbling with hot air. There was billowing black smoke in the hot air, which was Yudu devil qi. On the other side, son of heaven Yin, who was looking at each other from across the formation, trembled violently. Blood spewed out from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. The blood then turned into wisps of chaos qi. Mingdu's heaven gate behind him also made cracking sounds and was filled with cracks. Wisps of chaotic qi dispersed. Qin Mu, receive another bow from me. He shouted out sternly. Qin Mu shouted out. Yin Dynasty rose, receive another bow from me. The two of them shouted out like thunder as they bowed down once again. Another loud boom rang out, and son of heaven Yin's delicate body trembled violently as he retreated back repeatedly. Blood spurted out from his mouth, and his eyes turned red. It was as if his eyes were about to turn into chaotic qi. He said mournfully, Qin Mu, accept my bow again. The sea of qi and blood above Qin Mu's head boiled, and Yudu's devil qi dyed the sea of blood black. The skin on the surface of his corporeal body even cracked, and it was almost unable to trap his primordial spirit. The two of them bowed down once more, and their injuries became even more serious. Accept my bow. Accept my bow. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out, and Qin Mu was shaken until the gates of heaven and earth behind him exploded. His corporeal body couldn't withstand it anymore, and black sand of souls spurted out from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. On the other hand, Yin Tianzi, who was looking at each other from across the formation, suddenly exploded, and his corporeal body was turned into a ball of chaos qi. Even the gates of heaven of the nether capital behind him were turned into dust. Huge pieces of divine weapons fell into the netherworld sea along with wisps of chaos qi. Qin Mu's body swayed, but he didn't fall down. He suddenly executed Soul Guide to restrain the black sand in his scattered soul. He executed his divine art and reconstructed his soul. Butcher wanted to help him up, but he saw that he had already recovered. Even though his aura was weak, he was fine, so he withdrew his hand. Is Yin Tianzi dead? Butcher raised his heavenly knife and looked around to search for Yin Tianzi's whereabouts. Tianshu also raised his imperial palace divine blade and looked for Yin Tianzi's immortal soul. Luo Wushuang also raised his divine blade and looked around. Shahuali raised his demonic blade and dragon tooth. However, the dragon tooth was the tooth of the East Emperor Azure Dragon. The blade was not bright and could not shine into the depths of the void. On the other hand, there was a demonic eye on the hilt of the dragon tooth. The demonic eye rotated as it searched for Yin Tianzi. Although Yin Tianzi was not a celestial venerable, his abilities were extremely strange. He was so perfect that it was impossible to guard against him. They originally thought that killing Yin Tianzi was a small matter. However, killing Yin Tianzi was indeed a small matter. It was more difficult to kill Yin Tianzi. Not only that, Yin Tianzi's Yudu divine ability and the path of reincarnation also left them with lingering fear. Is he dead or gone? Butcher asked after searching for a long time, but he couldn't find any traces of Son of Heaven Yin. Qin Mu opened the vertical eye in the heart of his brows and looked around. His gaze suddenly saw the underworld sea surging in the distance. There was a head floating in the sea and rushing toward the underworld capital. He's not dead yet, he said. He has returned to the underworld capital. He was also an existence that cultivated the path of heavenly Yin and was proficient in the great Tao of Yudu, so it wouldn't be easy to kill him. There's no need to pay attention to him. Yin Tianzi is just a tool for us to test our skills. That's all. He won't be able to make it to the stage. He raised his head and saw the god and devil army of the underworld capital of the northern sky, as if they were facing a great enemy. Countless majestic gods and devils stood at the bow of the ship, looking at them nervously. Butcher, Tianshu, Luo Wushuang and the rest took a step forward. Luo Wushuang shook the one-armed divine knife and said indifferently, "Should we kill them all?" The expressions of the few divine generals in the lead changed drastically. They all executed their divine weapons to protect their bodies first. "There's no need." Qin Mu suddenly revealed a smile and waved at the tens of thousands of Northern Heaven's underworld capital army. "Disperse, all of you, disperse. Your family Son of Heaven Yin has already returned to the underworld sea, so all of you should also disperse and return to your own homes." The few generals looked as if they had been pardoned. Shahuali frowned and said, "They have seen our faces before, so if they were to report it." Qin Mu was all smiles as he took out a black scarf to cover his face. "Can't we see our faces now?" Luo Wushuang and Shahuali were dumbfounded. If they didn't cover their faces before and after, wouldn't they be covering their ears and stealing the bell? Butcher also took out a black cloth and covered his face. It was obvious that he was familiar with the process. After all, Qin Mu was from a famous family and he was from this famous family. As long as we aren't caught in the act, we will deny it. Who else can do anything to us? A mask is actually a shaming cloth. There's no difference between wearing it and not wearing it. Who else can we hide it from? Qin Mu was prepared, so he took out 3 black scarves and handed them over to Tianshu, Shahuali and Luo Wushuang. "As long as you aren't caught red-handed, you won't admit to it even if you die. When you start a lawsuit, there will be things to say. Black can also be said to be white, and dead can also be said to be alive. You guys can cover your faces first." The 3 of them silently took the black scarves and covered their faces. Qin Mu suddenly woke up and pulled away the black scarves. He said to the army of Northern Heaven's underworld capital that was about to leave, "I'm Heavenly Venerate Mu, and I'm going to supervise the battle in Mystic City. I encountered bandits along the way and damaged the treasure ship, so I'm conscripting one of your fast ships." The generals of Northern Heaven's underworld capital were all stunned. They were already stunned when they saw them cover their faces openly after the incident. Now, Qin Mu didn't even cover his face and directly used the identity of Heavenly Venerate Mu to conscript their ship. The thickness of his skin was so thick that even the sword of the Heavenly Emperor wouldn't be able to pierce it. The few generals looked at each other in dismay. Suddenly, one of them came to a realization and hurriedly ordered someone to make a fast ship to personally send it over. The few of them trembled in fear and didn't dare to speak. Qin Mu looked at them with a smile that wasn't a smile and said indifferently, "Why aren't you leaving?" "I'm going to cover my face. If I cover my face, I won't be Heavenly Venerate Mu but a bandit that even Son of Heaven Yin would dare to kill." The few generals rolled and crawled away. The 5 of them boarded the fast ship and Butcher looked at the retreating army of Northern Heaven and Dark Capital. He saw that even though the army of Dark Capital was retreating, the formation wasn't in disorder and was well organized. Even if they were retreating, they would still display a change in offense and defense. He could not help but frown. Yin Tianzi has a deep understanding of the art of war, and the art of war. His expression was solemn as he said in a deep voice, "If Yin Tianzi had not been angered and charged over in rage, he would have mobilized the Nether Capital army and activated the formation to trap us. I'm afraid that we would be lambs waiting to be slaughtered." Tianshu, Zhehuali, and Luo Wushuang were also generals leading the army. Luo Wushuang was originally the leader of the Lingxiu army, while Zhehuali was placed in an important position by Ling Yuxiu and served as a general in the western border. Tianshu was also one of the 4 heavenly kings under the founding emperor, and he controlled the army of the founding emperor era. They could also see how powerful Emperor Yin's army was, and they all frowned. The combat strength of a single Nether Capital god and devil was insignificant to them. Even the generals leading the army were at most at Yujing and Ling Zhao's cultivation realms. However, when these gods and devils gathered into an army and were united by the formation, the power they unleashed would be terrifying. Gathering sand into a tower and combining their strength to attack, even an existence at Emperor's throne realm wouldn't dare to face their attacks head-on. In a large-scale war between gods and devils, the power of the formation couldn't be underestimated. In the future, if Eternal Peace goes to war with Heavenly Court, the blind who has the mind and divine eyes will become the mainstay. Butcher stood at the bow of the ship and watched the torrential river flowing under the ship. There are 4 great heavenly kings, 4 great heavenly teachers, 4 great emperors, and Son of Heaven Een is only one of the 4 emperors, he said unhurriedly. If Blind wants to fight against such an existence on the formation, he has to whip him ruthlessly and let his formation go deeper into the path. Qin came to his side and felt the same way. He nodded and said, "No matter if it's Grandpa Blind or Grandpa Mute, I have been ruthlessly whipping them and making them work harder. You're just a shameless old gnat." Butcher shot a glance at him and reprimanded him before asking with concern, "How are your injuries? Will it affect the Battle of Mystic City?" "I've cultivated to the Jade Lake realm of the Ancestral Court, so I'm a huge Jade Lake. There's primordial chaos, primordial liquid in the sea, so any injury, as long as it's not a Dao injury, can be healed naturally."
Qin smiled.
"Even if my cultivation is damaged, I can recover quickly." Butcher saw that his aura was indeed recovering continuously, and the speed of recovery was astonishing. He couldn't help clicking his tongue in wonder. We've already seen how it's possible to refine baleful qi for our own use. The Jade Lake realm of the Ancestral Court actually has its own wondrous aspects. Zhehuali and Tianshu also came over to inquire about the wonders of Jade Lake. Qin told them what he had obtained during this period of time, and everyone was filled with envy. "I was in a hurry and didn't map the 4 great heaven gates, Jade Lake, Jade Stage and 9 Prison Stage. However, Su Shanghua, Lan Yutian and the rest were doing all this." Qin thought about it. Even they would need 1 to 20 years to map out all the Jade Lake Jade platforms and 9 prison platforms. However, as long as they can map it out, the cultivation system of Heaven Palace will have a huge change. Tianshu said with a solemn expression, "It's more than a huge change? It's simply an earth-shaking change. Dao realm and Heaven Palace realm merging into one. This is really." He couldn't find an adjective to describe it. Butcher said, "When Dao realm and Heavenly Palace combine, it's equivalent to having the Dao of Founding Emperor, and the power of Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven." Qin pondered over it and said, "It should be even stronger. After all, with the addition of 9 Prison Platform realm and the Ancestral Court of Yujing, this realm was said to be incomparably dangerous. Back then, even Supreme Emperor and Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning almost couldn't escape unscathed. I reckon the real Jade Capital would probably have a huge change to the original Jade Capital realm." Luo Wushuang's heart trembled violently. "You mean that after Dao realm and Heavenly Palace's cultivation system fuse, they will be much stronger than Founding Emperor and Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven?"
Qin musai drufeli.
"Much stronger? Even if they aren't much weaker than me. Of course they are still slightly weaker, but they are already extremely amazing." Everyone didn't listen to the second half of his sentence and only listened to the first half. The shock in their hearts was incomparable. "At that time it will be the ultimate cultivation system, right?" Zhehuali muttered. "The perfection of the cultivation system to the extent that it can't be improved is both a good thing and a bad thing. There probably won't be any more reform practitioners like us in the future." "Where is the ultimate cultivation system?" Qin shook his head and said, "Have you developed innate 5th Supreme Realm yet? Have you developed the cultivation system of the Great Dao of the Postnatal Realm yet? After becoming the Dao, will there still be room for improvement? How to cultivate the Dao tree, Dao flower, Dao fruit? These are all unknown. What's more," he said leisurely, "the people in the future will be different from us. We are slowly exploring the mysteries of the Dao. What we are exploring now may only be basic knowledge for the people in the future. They will continue to change on our basis. Perhaps the future cultivation system will be completely different from today." Butcher nodded and said, "If it were 30 years ago, I wouldn't have thought of the drastic change in the current cultivation system." Everyone nodded. 30 years ago, who would have thought of the Heavenly River realm? Who would have thought of the unity of the 7 great divine treasures? Who would have thought of the Dao realm system? Who would have thought of the 4 Heaven Gate realm and the 9 Prison Platform realm? Now they had all emerged one after another. These revolutionaries had seen further and gone further. In the future they would be in the 5th Supreme Realm, as well as the Dao tree, flower and Dao fruit, waiting for them to discover and excavate. There were also all kinds of acquired Dao that needed to evolve and evolve from generation to generation. On the ship, Butcher was grinding his heavenly knife while Tianshu was staring at the wine jar in Jahuali's hand. Jahuali was holding the wine jar to feed his demon knife and dragon tooth while Luo Wushuang was pacing on the deck. The distance of every step was precise and blurry. Qin Mu stood at the bow of the ship and controlled the direction, looking at Xiandu, which was getting closer and closer. Xiandu was like the sky. It looked like a round ball that was pinned on all the worlds in the universe, but it actually contained a large amount of space of different worlds. They were intertwined and complicated, so it wasn't a real round ball. If one raised their head in any world, they could see Xiandu. If one had enough patience, strength, and lifespan, they could fly to Xiandu. The Heavenly Duke of Xiandu could see any world with his gaze, and it was very similar to Qin Mu's divine treasure territory. The Heavenly Duke was like a four-faced god in Xiandu, so he couldn't see his back. He only had one shadow, and that was his feet. That was the Heavenly Yin. The sea of Heavenly Yin in Heavenly Yin world was also like the shape of his feet. Dozens of days later, the fast ship arrived at Xiandu. The ships of the Heavenly River Navy were floating on the surface of the river. They were vast and mighty, and their faces were hundreds of thousands of miles wide. These ships not only had large ships but also small ships. Of course, small ships were meant for the ships of the Heavenly Court. In the mortal world, these small ships were also large ships. Countless gods and demons stood on the ships, and some plunged into the river to hunt down the enemies in the river. The battle under the water was extremely fierce. Blood would occasionally appear on the surface of the water. This was the Star Lord stationed in Xuandu leading the rebel army into the river, in an attempt to sneak attack the Heavenly River Navy from the bottom of the water. However, there were many water gods and dragon gods in the Heavenly River Navy, so how could they succeed? On the front line, a huge sun was pushed over by the rebel army. On the sun, a majestic divine city floated on the surface of the sun. On it, there were sun guards of Xiandu controlling the huge flames and waving their flags. They were summoning the sun flames to burn the Heavenly River Navy. Qin Mu and the rest left the Heavenly River on their small boats to avoid the battlefield. The flames of war were burning in Xiandu, and tens of thousands of moon guards were controlling the bright planets as they rushed toward the battlefield. Most of the moon guards were women, so they cooperated with the sun guards. The moon would receive light from the sun, and after the transformation, they would turn into dead lights. There were also star lords controlling the stars, and there were numerous divine cities around them. There were starlight connections between the stars, and they mobilized the power of the stars to charge into the battlefield. Chains of light burst forth from the stars and the sun and moon, fighting fiercely with the Heavenly River Navy. The cannon lights and divine weapons that surged out from the ships of the Heavenly River Navy collided with the sun and moon stars of the rebels of Xiandu. It was a spectacular sight that was unforgettable. Qin Mu and the rest came to Xiandu, and huge fragments of stars streaked past their ships. They were the ashes of the sun that had been shattered. There were many of them, and the further they went, the more there were. Between the fragments, there were the corpses of huge gods and devils that floated quietly in the starry sky. They were the corpses of the Sun Guardian who had died in battle. The Sun Guardian, Moon Guardian, and Star Sovereign in Xiandu were the divine priests who were in charge of the operation of the sun, moon, and stars in all the worlds. On the surface, they were under the command of the Heavenly Court, but in reality, they were the supporters of the Heavenly Duke of Xiandu. The Heavenly Duke controlled the operation of the stars in the myriad realms, and the operation of the sun and moon naturally had countless fanatical followers. On the surface, the Heavenly Court was the most powerful, but in reality, the ancient gods that ruled a region all had their own powerful forces. The reason why the Heavenly Court did not take action against these ancient gods was precisely because the forces they controlled were also a force that could not be underestimated. The reason why the meeting of the Heavenly Alliance required the rulers of all the heavens and 10,000 worlds to participate was also because the Heavenly Duke of Xiandu had his own power in all the heavens and 10,000 worlds. Qin Mu and the rest retracted their gazes. When they reached this place, they could sense the aura of Heavenly Tao. Heavenly Tao couldn't be easily sensed and required extremely high cultivation of Tao realm to be able to sense the circulation of Heavenly Tao. However, the Heavenly Tao of Xiandu was actually so dense that anyone who entered could easily sense it. Xiandu must have also sensed that the situation was not good. That's why the Heavenly Tao was so intense and strengthened the bodies of the Heavenly Dukes. Butcher felt the power of the Heavenly Tao surging over and filling his body, Filling his tendons and body with incomparably powerful strength, he said in a deep voice, "The heavenly Tao cannot attack directly. The great Tao is not powerful. The ones who are powerful are the Abhijnas and those who control Abhijnas. That's why the heavenly Tao strengthened our bodies." Tianshu and the rest also felt the blessing of heavenly Tao. It was formless, but when it surged into their bodies, all kinds of abnormal phenomena appeared. They transformed into 49 forms of heavenly Tao treasures to protect their corporeal bodies and primordial spirits. Qin Mu had the deepest understanding of heavenly Tao, so he immediately caught the ripples of heavenly Tao in Xiandu and said solemnly, "Let's go to Tianfang City." Tianfang was the 11th heavenly Tao among the 49 heavenly Tao. Tianfang City was one of the 49 divine cities in Xuandu. There was a huge amount of energy gathered there, and the aura of the heavenly Tao was the densest. When they arrived at Tianfang City, they saw that the heavenly Tao was supporting the entire divine city. Above the divine city, it was so dense that it took form. Countless sun guardians, moon guardians, and star lords were gathered here. The divine city was surrounded by thousands of suns, moons, and stars. It was like it was floating in the center of a vast galaxy. The light was resplendent and blinding, and it was almost impossible to look straight at it. At that moment, Tianfang City was being besieged by the Ancestor God King's great sun star lord, Danfeng Lai, who was leading the Ancestor God King's army. Countless golden crows were dragging the suns, and countless fire crow soldiers flew out from the suns to attack Tianfang City. However, Danfeng Lai had no way of invading Tianfang City's heavenly barrier-like setup. Danfeng Lai had once been in charge of surveying the heavenly axiom in Mystic City. However, the heavenly axiom had condoned the Earth Mother Yuan Lord and swept away all the forces that the heavenly courts had left in Mystic City. Millions of his personal guards had all died at the hands of the Earth Mother Yuan Lord. The army he controlled now was a newly assembled army. The Golden Crow celestial race that he had mobilized from the myriad realms could not compare to his original personal guards. He was in existence on the Emperor's throne realm, so he took the lead and charged forward. When Qin Mu and the rest arrived, the battle was at its most intense. Just as Red Phoenix was about to charge into the divine city, the heavenly Tao in the city suddenly trembled. Sun Guardians, Moon Guardians, and Star Sovereign shouted in unison, and their magic power connected, condensing the heavenly Tao in the sky. It turned into a heavenly seal that crashed down with a loud bang. Before the heavenly seal could completely land, the corners of Red Phoenix's eyes twitched violently. His body instantly seemed to be locked down by the chains of heavenly Tao, and he couldn't move. Boundless pressure pressed down from above, and before the heavenly seal could reach his head, his bones crackled and his skin exploded. Divine blood boiled. Red Phoenix let out a series of screeches, and with a sway of her body, she turned into a fire phoenix. 3 heavenly palaces rushed into the sky, and his primordial spirit and magic power were fully unleashed, dragging the divine suns that had been refined to meet the heavenly seal. The 9 divine suns were like 9 stars that bombarded the heavenly seal continuously. The violent explosion lifted the heavenly seal, and the fire phoenix flapped its wings to fly away. Boom! The heavenly seal crushed the 9 divine suns and crashed down, sending broken limbs and arms flying in the battlefield. The countless divine weapons and primordial spirits under Pill Phoenix Lai's command shattered into pieces, and countless limbs flew in the air. They were then blown into ashes by the blazing hurricane. The terrifying shockwave rushed in front of Qin Mu and the rest, making their bodies unstable. Even the turrets couldn't get close to Tianfang City. After the impact of the heavenly seal, a courtyard suddenly appeared on the battlefield. It was different from the usual ones. Above it was the sky, and below it was the ground. The body of the courtyard was like that of a dragon. The moment the courtyard appeared on the battlefield, it was like a devil that could devour everything. It sucked in the air of Danfeng Lai's army, and countless divine weapons and divine generals danced in the air. They wanted to catch something, but they couldn't. They were all sucked into the well and turned into ashes. Isn't the power of heavenly Tao too strong? Tianshu muttered. Red Phoenix suffered a defeat and immediately cried out for gold, calling for the defeated soldiers to retreat frantically. Countless sun guardians with majestic bodies rushed out from Tianfang City and chased after them. Qin Mu stayed outside the battlefield for a moment before the fast ship started to sail towards Tianfang City. The guards in Tianfang City sensed the aura of heavenly Tao coming from their bodies and didn't stop them. They opened the city gates and allowed them to enter. Just as they reached the city, they heard someone shouting, "Shoot the little people! Shoot the little people!" Qin Mu looked towards the source of the voice and saw that those naughty children should be the children of Sun, Moon and Moon Guardians of Xuandu. They had bows and arrows on their backs and were shooting arrows at the few grass men. Among the few scarecrows, one was the ancestor god king, the other was Fire Heavenly Venerate, and the last one was Qin Mu. One of the children shot a few arrows consecutively and cheered, "I've hit Qin Mu, little man Qin. I've hit him too." The other children who hadn't hit Qin Mu and the scarecrow went forward and spat a few mouthfuls at the scarecrow. Qin Mu was silent and touched the black cloth on his face. Butcher came to his side and patted his shoulder. He said in a deep voice, "Not everyone can understand what you have done. I know it's just a child, what am I afraid of?" Qin Mu sneered and walked into the city. "Do I have to bear a lot of infamy? I don't care about this." Butcher looked at his back and shook his head, following his footsteps. Tianshu pulled away the black cloth. He said, "I might know the leader of Xuandu who is guarding Tianfang City. He is most likely Du's father, Di Qing. It is said that he is a descendant of the Heavenly Duke. During the founding emperor era, he was the sun guardian of the Yuan world. Under the name of the Heavenly Duke, he came to the world to help the founding emperor. Later on, Di was born and displayed amazing talent. He entrusted Di to the founding emperor. One of you is Tianzuan Mu, two of you are from the Heavenly Court's Lingxiu army, and the other is Tianzuan Mu's teacher. It's not convenient for you to show your face. I have an old relationship with him. Follow me to see him." Everyone agreed and followed his footsteps. "I heard that Di Qing and Di don't have a good relationship," Luo Wushuang suddenly said. Tianshu said, "It's an old matter. Di's mother was a human, and Di Qing was a celestial. He had the bloodline of the Heavenly Duke. After his mother became pregnant, Di Qing abandoned her. Later on, he gave birth to Di. The two of them relied on each other, but her mother's life was bitter. She was in pain and died. Di met Di Qing by accident and Di Qing recognized him as his child. That was why he took her in. He also felt that his child with the human race was a stain on him, so he gave it to the founding emperor. He originally planned to be the founding emperor's child bride. He was one of the heavenly kings under the founding emperor, and his visit to Di Qing immediately caused a stir. His arrival represented the founding emperor's attitude, and Di Qing hurriedly led the many guards of Tianfang City to meet him. After the founding emperor saw Di's talent, he was shocked, so he sent her to various places to study. Because of this, Di hated Di Qing to the bone. When he saw him, he never spoke. Later, the founding emperor tribulation erupted, and Di Qing directly abandoned the founding emperor and left. This made Di even more contemptuous. When Tianshu saw Di Qing and the others coming over, he quickly stopped talking and laughed out loud. "Brother Di Qing, how long has it been?" Di Qing had a tall and sturdy figure, white hair and silver eyes. He had the strange image of a heavenly duke. He laughed loudly and said, "Founding emperor didn't forget our past friendship and ordered you to come, so I can be at ease." The two of them hugged each other tightly, and Di Qing smiled. "And today, the Tao is flourishing and protecting Xiandu. Even if you didn't come, the Heavenly Court wouldn't be able to do anything to Xiandu. It's good that you're here, so I can share some of the credit with you." He then laughed out loud again. Qin Mu and the rest frowned and didn't say anything. Tianshu's expression changed. He said solemnly, "I saw the four emperors' divine weapons being transported here on the way. Apart from the four emperors' divine weapons, there were also divine weapons like Heavenly Venerate Royal and Tao Fire Ancestral Land. Tianfang City couldn't withstand it at all. Furthermore, 6 of the 10 Heavenly Venerates had also rushed over. In front of Heavenly Venerates, Tianfang City was like a chicken that could be broken with a single touch." "You are exaggerating." Di Qing shook his head. "Tianshu, are you here to help or to mislead the crowd? My Tianfang City is blessed by the Heavenly Tao and is unbreakable. Even if the 10 Heavenly Venerates attack, they will not be able to break through this Heavenly Tao city. We are old friends and I will not pursue the matter. Is my daughter here? Tianshu shook his head. Di Qing laughed coldly. She is also a heartless person.